like to call to order the Malibu City Council adjourned regular meeting of March 26, 2018. I have a roll call.
Councilmember Lamont?
Here.
Councilmember Rosenthal?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wagner?
Here.
Mayor Mullen?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Skylar isn't by phone.
Yeah, he's here.
There he is.
Lester Tobias, would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you, Lester. May I have a report on the closed session?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, tonight's regular meeting convened at 5:30, at which time we recessed to a closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8. The council discussed the item that was listed on the posted agenda and took no reportable action. We concluded the closed session at 6:09 and reconvened here at 6:30.
Thank you very much. May I have an approval of the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Rosenthal?
Yes.
Councilmember Lamont?
Yes.
Councilmember Peak?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wagner?
Yes.
Mayor Mullen?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, now we move on to ceremonial presentations, and we're going to make a proclamation.
Mayor, if I could just report on the posting of the agenda really quick.
You know, with all the spoon feeding, I really do need supervision, so thank you very much.
The agenda for this meeting was properly posted on March 14th, 2018.
All right, now we have a ceremonial presentation, and it's to declare the proclamation declaring March 30th, 2018 as the 75th anniversary of the Warsaw Pact Ghetto Uprising, and I'd like to invite Mr. John Honingsfeld to meet me at the podium, please, to accept the proclamation. Stand aside. I'm going to read the proclamation for you. Okay. And I want to say a few words, and then I'll let you say a few words. Okay, as you know, come on up here, John. I'm a military veteran, and I work in the fire department, and I hear the expression hero thrown around a lot. And to me, the definition of a hero is somebody who does incredible bravery for something that they're not trained for and not prepared for. And this commemorates some true heroes in the history of man. So I would like to read this proclamation. Proclamation during March 30th, 2018 as the 75th anniversary of the Warsaw Pact Ghetto Uprising. Whereas, in 1943, a small number of starving Jews with hardly any weapons held off the German soldiers for 6 weeks of the Warsaw Ghetto. Whereas, March 30th, 2018, the Malibu Senior Center will be hosting an event to commemorate the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Malibu City Council does hereby proclaim March 20, 2018 as the 75th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, presented this 26th day of March 2018. And I'd like to present this to you, sir. Thank you very much. And please have a few words, and then we'll pose for a photo.
Okay, yes, thank you. Thank you, council members, Mayor Wagner, council members. About 7 weeks ago, I came here. You approved my event, our event, and I appreciate it very much. I'll tell you that with the city of Malibu supporting this event, through emails, I was able to get the Polish diplomat to come for the Polish diplomat in Los Angeles to come, the Israeli diplomat in Los Angeles to come, a representative from the state senator's office, and a representative from the state assemblyman's office, and many others. Many others will be coming, singing, and reciting historical information and so on. There's a total of 13 items on the agenda. I gave a agenda to the clerk, to the city clerk, so please look at it. And it would, I would very much appreciate it if somebody from the city would come, you know, and represent the city and speak at the event. It would be very, very nice. Naturally, you could say whatever you like and speak as long as you like. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Let's come on over here and take a pose for a photo. First, put that stuff down, right down here. I'll have a photo, and then I'll hold the proclamation. Okay, and over here. We'll shake hands. We'll smile. Oh, wait, continue holding hands. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for coming down.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, now it's time for written and oral communications from the public. Do I have any speaker slips? Okay, first to the podium is Shane Howerton, and Shane will be followed by Craig Gold. So Craig, get ready, and then we'll have Ken Kearsley after that.
Distinguished representatives, observers, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of this community and of all this nation's citizens, it is my duty as an American patriot to bring forward an ever-growing negative trend. This trend being the mass starvation of this country's veterans, citizens, and children. According to the World Health Organization, hunger is the single greatest threat to the world's public health, stating that malnutrition is the biggest contribution to child mortality. Over 3 million children under 5 die every year with starvation as a contributing factor to mortality. It is well known that the relationship between hunger and crime lies with impulse control, and it is also well known that people who cannot control themselves commit crimes. The International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health has found that people who reported recurring hunger during childhood were more prone to violence or acts of violence as a result. To highlight specific issues, it was brought forward a direct link between behavioral issues and deficiencies in omega-3 acids, these absolute vital acids found in salmon and eggs. In 2002, Oxford University affirmed that good nutrition can help reduce violent behavior in adults. It is important that I take time to educate this council and our people of the absolute failing system we call the Supplemental Nutritional Assistant Program, or SNAP. SNAP benefits cost $70.9 billion in the fiscal year of 2016 and supplied nearly 44.2 million Americans. This is only 14% of the population. With an average of only $125.51 for each person per month in food assistance, this equates to $4.04 a day. It is written in the soldier's oath, in order to establish a more perfect union, that domestic tranquility be maintained as well as the promotion of the general welfare. If a soldier is to honor his constitutional duty, this must be done. With that being said, domestic tranquility is described as peace at home, while the general welfare of our public refers to the health, peace, morality, and the safety of our citizens. In these statements combined with the previous, it is safe to say our soldiers are in direct confliction of what they raised their hand on the Bible to do for our citizens. I request at this time the immediate engagement of our true leaders in uniform with the direct support in acquiring properties nationwide to begin what is known as the project. To summarize the project, this plan is to be unique to each individual's council and their area. To further this request, it is to be centered around agriculture, further manufacture of recycles, and the advancement of knowledge and wealth. Separate from the request of direct military action, I ask here tonight for the immediate allocation of property and support of this highly prestigious council, as well as command to oversee all operations within this request. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shane. Okay, Craig Gold, you're next.
Good evening, honorable members of the City Council. My name is Craig Gold. I'm here again. I live in Sycamore Park. I live at the top of the hill, the place where a particular state agency has come in and decided they want to build a park on private land that's not zoned for a park. Basically, the MRCA has purchased a piece of land that's on a couple of sides of my property. And when they purchased it, a lot of people said, well, that's the end of the story. But doing some legal research on my own and having a few attorneys involved as well, we asked the question, what happens when a state agency, specifically the MRCA, the SMMC, purchases private land? Does it become public land at that point? No. It's zoned rural residential. It remains zoned rural residential. The purchase of the land alone does not change the zoning. Parks are not a permitted use of land in rural residential zones. The Malibu Code does not recognize parks as such. The local implementation plan requires a conditional use permit, a CUP. What I am asking the City Council for is to please help residents of Malibu and enforce the zoning laws in the City of Malibu. I know that if I were to go up and start building things just haphazardly on my land, somebody from the city is going to come tap me on the shoulder and say, you can't do that. The City of Malibu has the ability to do the same thing to the state agencies that are doing this, that are coming to private land and trying to open it up to the public. It's simply not a use that should be permitted, and we're here to ask the City Council to please help us. We've been here before, and we'd like to know what's going on. Again, a conditional use permit is required, and the city does not seem to be requiring it. Please help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. And next, Ken Kearsley. And Ken, I'm thinking that maybe you have some extra minutes here. Let's see, you got two extra speaker slips, so I guess that gives them how many minutes? 5. Ken, you got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Honorable members of the City Council. Sorry our minions aren't here tonight. We're over at the MRCA meeting. MRCA is applying for $250,000 to restructure our road from Proposition 84. So we're over there protesting the use of water money, again, water money, to make changes on our road and the property that they bought. We have, the city has issued an NOV on some benches, some signs, and some trash cans. We understand that the NOV, the notice of violation, said cover up the signs. Now, I don't know who put that in. They're ugly, even with covering up the signs. But the real issue, as Craig said, is that we would like the city, and we would require the city to protect our privacy and our safety by requiring the city to give us due process with a conditional use permit. If I go back in history, there are a few of us remember some of the things that happened before. If you'll remember Tricus Park was rural residential. And they required the city, required the city to have a CUP for a park that was owned by Malibu. And if you'll remember right, the Malibu West came down with their pitchforks and tapers. Tapers, for anybody who doesn't know, is a thing that Frankenstein hated. And they opposed it, but they had their due process. All we're asking for is due process. The second thing we're going to ask for is that you relook at and have a hearing on something that I sat on and voted for, and that was to set up a policy to stop the use of gates on public property, mainly Zumeres. A group of people in Zumeres wanted to establish a private gate on public property, a public road. That was intended for a public road, not a private road. We're asking to put, like everybody else has, a gate on private road, private property to protect us. Last week, we had a couple people come in who wanted to hike up there with a pit bull, and was very offensive to our guard and threatened him with a pit bull on a leash and threw a rock at him. This is our safety. This is not something that's isolated. We need you to protect us and every other access into the future that Joe is building at the Pacific Slope Coastal Trail. Now, we have formed an informal group. It's becoming more formal. We're going to call it a federation of all the neighborhoods that are being threatened, including Latigo and Ramirez and what have you, the 6 or 7, and try to oppose what is happening to the city of Malibu. We are not NIMBYs. We are trying to protect ourselves, our privacy. I didn't think in my later years that I'd be spending 3 or 4 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a weekend, trying to protect our neighborhood from intruders. We don't mind people coming in and visiting us. We just don't want the whole damn state of California coming in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And next is Brittany Stevens. And Brittany, you have 5 minutes too, I believe.
I do. Okay, good evening, City Council members, City Attorney, City Manager. Thank you all for letting us speak today. And I'll keep it brief. I don't think that I need all 4 minutes because I know you guys have a long agenda too. But we have been here in the past multiple times now. You guys are probably getting very familiar with our faces and with our concerns. But what we ask for is help, and we're not really feeling like we're getting it. And that's what we're really asking for, is we want to know what's going on. What's the status? The MRCA, like Ken just mentioned, they're having a meeting today asking for more money, thousands of dollars of taxpayer dollars to come into our neighborhood and to change the character of our neighborhood. And we're not even sure what the status is of the city's NOV, which is a notice of violation. So we appreciate you sending that, but we haven't heard anything from that. We actually filed a public records request because no one officially reached out from the city to let us know the status of that, and we haven't even heard back. That was filed on March 12th, and we're supposed to receive information from that within 10 days, and no one has even responded. So that's something that I would really ask your help with. And we just want to see what you can do for us. The MRCA, the SMMC, they're relentlessly moving forward. We're not stopping them. The city's not helping us to stop them. We're trying on our own, but we're just a small neighborhood. And like Ken just said, we're spending hours and hours doing research every night. We're trying to get as many people involved as possible because this is precedent setting and this is going to affect all of Malibu. So we're asking for your help now in our neighborhood to help stop this, put a pause on it, to help us. And that way, hopefully other neighborhoods and other people won't be just spending the time and the effort, and it's really stressful. It's causing so much emotional distress in our entire neighborhood. You just heard Ken say in his later years, but this is everyone. This is our whole, I mean, it really affects everyone, and so we're really just asking for your help. You guys said, as the city last time, Christy, you said that you will not have a state agency violating Malibu's city codes, but we haven't really seen much action since then. So we're asking you to step up As Ken said, if we can help us to get our gate, to protect our neighborhood, to help us with the NOV, and to help us with the CUP, as you can see, we really want your help. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope that we hear from you shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. And next is Howard Rudsky. Howard? And then Howard will be followed by Ryan Embry.
Hi, City Council and Honorable Mayor. Thank you for hearing us. I'd like to tell you what we've done through the Planning Department and the city so far regarding the gate. This has been going on a little while now, and the city has tried to be extremely helpful. The Planning Department has allowed us to submit things. They've gave us item agendas. We followed through on the item agendas to try to get the gate. We have the Public Works Department and the Fire Department approvals, and we thought it was going to be an easier process. Unfortunately, it hasn't been. At this point, our planner, Jessica Thompson and Adrian, I met with them last week. Again, they were extremely helpful, and they laid out their position of why they need to do certain things, and that's why I'm here to ask you for some help. They're saying Chapter 13.4 is what they're looking at, but that doesn't really allow them to do anything, and what they're going after is the zone code interpretation that I passed out to you guys. And they're looking at this as the document that they have to help them make a decision. Well, as Ken pointed out, this was for a public street, not a private neighborhood. So my thought process is that if a former city council can, zoning code interpretation, and the city's following that, the city council, meaning you folks, can draw up something or adopt something that's more favorable. Because I think we all want this decision regarding gates and other things that not only affect Sycamore Park, but many other neighborhoods to be decided by the citizenry and the city council that we elected, not an outside agency. And I think we all agree on a couple things, that we want privacy, character of neighborhood, safety, things like that. So I'm just here asking for your help because I think the planning department has done what they can. Their hands are kind of tied now. It's up to us to help and for you to help us. And we've had the sheriff, the head sheriff come out. He believes we need a gate. It's gotten to the point where there's no more we can do through the planning department, who's been very helpful, and now it's up to us asking you for help. So thank you very much for the time.
Thanks, Howard. Brian?
I wonder if they need a TUP, because they seem to be having events all the time up in these areas, and they don't know how many guests they're going to have, or they're probably going to have more guests than you could have at a Malibu house party. So I'm not sure what the difference is. You might want to consider that angle for interpreting the public going up there. The second aspect I had was that the city's council policies, and I think in the general plan it says that the city will help preserve and protect private property rights. This is a private property right issue, and I hope that the city council can interpret that appropriately and develop those policies, programs, and implementations which carries that out to fruition. The third thing I wanted to mention tonight is that I didn't find a clear city council policy on the, I don't know if it's under conflicts of interest or how it works under the human resources provision about contracting with the city. If you're an outgoing employee, if you can contract with the city, or if you're an outgoing council member, if you can contract with the city for work and positions that you might have a background angle for. So I'd like you to explore that and possibly adopt one. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. And now we're going to hear from William Hammond, who I believe has a poem for us. William, you have the podium.
Thank you, William, for coming today. I just wanted to do a little can we not put a timer on him? William is here at my invitation. And I don't know the author. I'm sure you can tell us the author, but at a few weeks ago when there was a march that the students at Malibu High put together protesting the events at Parkland in Florida, it was a very moving event. Lou and I were both there, and there was a march and it ended at Malibu High, and William read a poem that was so impactful that I invited him to come here and read it to us because I think it's important for us all to hear, as well as everybody watching us on TV. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. All right. When is it time to talk about it? After Sandy Hook and 26 lives were took, the politicians shook their heads and said we shouldn't talk about it. Our nation grieved, they gave their prayers and sent their tweets, but they didn't want to talk about it. We can't politicize this, they said. 20 kids are dead. We have to lay them to rest before we can talk about it. Like it was honoring their deaths more to once again ignore the very reasons, but we didn't want to talk about it. And you can take the rhetoric and switch the tragedy. I couldn't tell the difference, which is obvious insanity, but I was just as culpable for what I didn't do or say, because honestly, it hurt too much. I didn't want to talk about it. Well, now, I want to talk about it. Private guns have killed more Americans since 1960 than all of our wars combined. Now, personally, that's a statistic that completely blows my mind. Or what about the number of our gun-related homicides? It's higher than any other developed country by 20 times. And that's not only crimes, because on the average, roughly 33,000 people every year lose their lives. If that was terrorism, we would straight up lose our minds. If that's not terrorism, we have straight up lost our minds. In fact, maybe terrorism should be redefined. Because mass shootings have become a sign of modern times. When do we draw the line? When do we grow a spine and stop using the Second Amendment to hide behind? You want to keep your guns? That's perfectly fine. I'm not arguing to take them away unless you're hunting lions, and yet the NRA accuses me of lying, like secretly I'm trying. That way they can change the conversation from the people dying. It's really evil. I'm tired of this misleading line that they're feeding to the media. The talking points are really just excuses to be greedier. And the Congress won't do their jobs because lobbyists have paid them off. So they ignore the problems that we have put them there to solve. Public service has a private interest when campaign contributions make them liable to parties that contribute. It's a form of paying tribute, but the dollars don't make sense. How can a background check be something we're against? If the prevailing argument is it's about our mental health, then it's illogical to think that regulations wouldn't help. And while the left and right fight, both are dying in between. It's not the red, white, and blue, it's the red, white, and green. I can't take an open water bottle onto a plane, but I can walk around Nevada with an AR-15. Can't you hear the children scream? Can't you hear the children scream? Can't you hear the children? Can't you hear them? Can't you hear them scream? You're on the wrong side of history. There is no in between. When you look back in 20 years, tell me who you want to be. Can't you hear the children? Can't you hear them? Can't you hear them scream? It echoes through the halls of schools that were replaced by crime scenes. Can't you see the children? Can't you see them? Can't you see them bleed? Can't you see their parents seeing them in each and every dream? When the news vans have left, and they're left with quiet streets and private grief, but they can't leave, they can't leave, they can't leave. So they count all the seconds, minutes, hours, days, and nights and weeks, dealing with a pain so deep that it's awake inside of sleep. It's in their bones and in their smiles and in their hair and their speech. And in the morning they remember, tears streaming down their cheeks, chest heaving from the morning. It's impossible to breathe, and at that point it doesn't matter what you once believed. We have let a special interest hold us hostage over greed, but it's in our hands. So why are we the ones who have to freeze? Don't move anything. Don't say anything. Don't do anything. Don't change anything. Thank you.
Thank you, William.
Thank you. And just clarifying, that was a poem by NQ. He's like this poet Grand Slam champion. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And that concludes our public comment period. And it's time for commission and committee and city manager updates.
Well, that's a very hard act to follow. Thank you very much for being here. So I'd like to start my update. I'd like to introduce a few of our new staff people who just started with the city. I'd like to start by introducing Christine Shen. She's our new Environmental Sustainability Department Sustainability Analyst, and really pleased to have her here. So if you want to stand up and wave, Christine. We also have Mark Johnson with us tonight. He is the Environmental Sustainability Department's Environmental Programs Coordinator, so welcome. And then we also have DDA Murillo, who is one of our new assistant planners. So give them a welcome, and you'll see them around City Hall. We have a couple other new staff people who weren't able to be here tonight, but I will be sure to introduce them hopefully at the next council meeting. I also wanted to remind everybody that the library needs assessment is still open, and I'd encourage people to go onto the city's website and complete that. We appreciate your feedback. Our Easter Happening event, which is our Easter egg event that we have for kids, was postponed to this coming Friday, March 30th, and that'll be from 3 to 6 at Bluffs Park. And if you need a dose of cuteness, I highly encourage you to go there. And I just want to give a very brief update. I know everybody has experienced some delays along PCH, and so I want to give you the latest information. There is still work going on as the slope stabilization project on PCH between Meadows Court and Latigo Canyon, and the speed limit there has been lowered to 30 miles an hour, so please make sure you are abiding by that. I've heard that the tickets double in construction zones, so I don't want anybody to get that ticket. There's also work going on at Pacific Coast Highway and Cross Creek. Tonight, the signals will be taken down in that area and replaced with stop signs, and that will be between 8 p.m. tonight and 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. And then tomorrow there will be work continuing as there was today, where the number 2 eastbound lane in the 22,000 block of Pacific Coast Highway will be closed from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So I just wanted to make sure everybody had that information. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Do I got any committee reports? Any council member reports? Hang on. You're the pro tem, so Lou, why don't you go for it?
Okay. First of all, that's the third time I've heard that poem, and it is just as impactful every single time. And you do an incredible job reading it. Yeah. So thank you very much. I had the opportunity to be in Washington on the 14th when the first walkout happened, and on Capitol Hill there were thousands of kids, just thousands, and you guys are the ones that are going to make this change happen, because we couldn't do it, but you can. So don't give up. I wanted to ask you about the notice of violation, what's happening with that, and can somebody tell me, can you or Christian?
I'm going to ask Bonnie Blue, our planning director, to respond to that.
Good evening, council and members of the public. Our code enforcement officer, as soon as we got word that the signs had been posted and the bench and the trash can installed on the MRCA's property, code enforcement immediately started reaching out to the property owner about this violation. And we've gone through the typical steps that we go through in terms of responding to a code violation. So contact was made, a notice was sent, the notice was responded to. They disagree that they require any sort of permit. We believe that they do require a conditional use permit from the city, so the notice of violation was placed on the property. In terms of a public records request, from the neighborhood, I wasn't aware that one was filed. We'll try to track that down, and we'll definitely keep the neighborhood apprised of anything that, the steps that are being taken on this, but that's where the process is at this point.
And I understand that you asked them just to cover the signs. Is there a reason we didn't ask them to take it down?
That's the most immediate way to address the issue, is to just cover them and remove the trash cans and the picnic table. we can ask them to remove the sign itself as well. But our first priority was just to get rid of the improvements and cover the sign.
While we're still on this subject, on this zoning code interpretation, I'm just going to read number 3.
Mm-hmm.
It says, the applicant shall demonstrate to the satisfaction of the Public Works Department that the street is privately owned and maintained, and if gated, will not affect the through traffic flow or access to or from public streets. Now, weren't they able to do that for you?
Well, oh, thank you. That's very helpful. Yeah, the planning department's review of this is that a gate for vehicular access would not have an adverse effect on through traffic because there's no outlet among the streets. We did suggest that the neighborhood include a pedestrian access gate, just relative to an easement that the MRCA has purported to have. I don't know all the details of that easement, but in terms of the vehicular access gate, planning does not see that as a problem in terms of traffic flow.
So where is this now?
A coastal development permit is required to process the access gate, and so we've been working with Howard Rutsky has been the point of contact with the planning department. So we're working with them to answer any questions they have about submittal of the application and materials and things like that.
And how long does that normally take?
Once it comes in, it will take probably a few months to get to hearing. But at your direction, we can put that
Well,
as a different priority.
I'd like to actually take a look at the policy that we're talking about, and maybe we should discuss it and get put on an agenda, maybe at the next meeting or the one after.
Right.
But I'd like
the policy,
for us to take a look at it. I understand the policy, and I do understand that it was actually designed for public streets. This is a private street, and it seems to me that should be a whole other ballgame.
I don't disagree that if this was designed, our reading of it was that it was designed for private streets. It predates my tenure here at the city, and it was something created by the city council. So of course you have the authority to make any changes to it. The coastal development permit requirement is something that stems from the local coastal program, and we couldn't find a CDP exemption that would work for the project. So that's what's triggering the need for a coastal development permit.
Okay, well, it kind of predates all of us up here too, so we'd like to take another look at it?
Sure.
Okay. Now let me tell you what I've been doing. As you know, I attended the National League of Cities Congressional City Conference in Washington, D.C., where 19,000 cities across the country are represented. I'm the vice chair of the Community and Economic Development Committee Federal Advocacy Committee, and that committee has a responsibility for group homes legislation. So we went to Capitol Hill and discussed two things. One was infrastructure, and the other thing were sober living homes, and we're slowly but surely making progress on that. And through the good graces of our Southern California Association of Governments representative, Council Member Laura Rosenthal, she got me the opportunity to address SCAG, their committee that endorses legislation. And I did a presentation on our bill, AB 3162, and it was approved unanimously. So it moves on to the next step. Thank you, Laura. I also attended a meeting and a panel in Newport Beach with Florida State's Attorney Dave Arenberg. Dave is an expert on sober living law, and he's had several laws passed in the state of Florida that our legislature is now looking at. And there may be ways for us to move some of that forward. I attended and spoke at the annual Meals on Wheels event in Santa Monica with Supervisor Sheila Kuehl and Santa Monica Mayor Pro Tem Gleam Davis. And I've been doing this for several years. This organization does incredible work, and a lot of it addresses some of the things that you were discussing before in terms of hunger. And there's hunger in lots of places that don't look like they have that issue, but they do. In addition to that, they also are now working with veterans And it's just a wonderful organization, and we as a city have supported it for many years. And I attended, along with Jay and Laura, the Malibu Township Council press conference that was held in this room. I have to congratulate them. They did a sensational job. To Richard Lawrence and Antonine and the board of MTC, you guys did a spectacular job setting that up. The panel was interesting and informed and educational, and it was terrific, and I truly appreciate it. And on the lighter side, I was a judge at Songfest at Pepperdine, and that was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Laura?
Thank you. First, I want to welcome Pepperdine journalism students, right? Are you all journalism? Okay, welcome. We'll try not to have it too boring of a meeting, get a little spice up. We already had a great presentation, a little art in there. Thank you, William, so much for coming. It's a very impactful poem, and the way you present it, and this past weekend I was at the march in Santa Monica. Didn't make it to downtown LA, but I saw a lot of Malibu residents there, and there were like 6,000 or 7,000 people just in Santa Monica. And I know that there was one in for the South Bay too, Manhattan Beach and Hermosa Beach. This is March for Our Lives, by the way. And it's really, as Lou said, it makes me very happy to see so many people come out to state how they feel about this. And I really hope that this issue does not go away, that actual real changes are made. And actually, I've been working with somebody in Malibu to look at what else we can do in Malibu. The state of California has some pretty strict rules, but we're looking at what other statements we can say for our city too. So thank you again for coming out and doing that. I know it's a busy time for you. A senior, right? Junior at Malibu. Okay. Well, thank you. And thank you to your mom too, Lucian, for coming out. I wanted to wish everyone a happy Passover and happy Easter, which is coming up both this weekend, and April Fool's Day is on Easter. I always was hoping that we would have a city council meeting on April Fool's Day, but it never falls on that because we meet on the second Monday of the month. I was at the Malibu Area Conservation Coalition meeting, as well as the Superintendent Feasibility Committee. Our school district is looking at putting a bond on the November 2018 ballot, but for the first time ever, it would be one bond for Santa Monica and one bond for Malibu, and we would be able to keep all our money for our own 4 schools here in Malibu. I also spoke at the Malibu Chamber of Commerce breakfast, just filled them in on a few things, and went to, and Lou, Rick, you were there, and I think you were there at our supervisor, Sheila Kuehl, had an open house. Oh, you weren't there. Okay, Rick and I were there, and it's just something that she does in her Calabasas office for elected officials in the West Valley here, and that's always appreciated to get one-on-one time with the supervisor. I also, Rick and myself, we also went to Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District Board meeting, where the issue of unification vote, it was the only thing on the agenda, and there's been some good press about it, and the board voted with some conditions to go ahead with a 50-year plan, to a 50-year financial sharing plan to separate our 2 school districts. And as some of you may know, people have been working on this for a long time. I've been working on it since 2007. There were some attempts in the 80s and the 90s and the earlier 2000s. And AMPS, Advocates for Malibu Public Schools, has been working on it since 2010. So what I'm asking for, and Rick and I, as the school district unification ad hoc committee, would like to get consensus to put on our next agenda on April 9th to look at, the school district is asking us to either hold off on or put on hold or take away our petition at LACO, Los Angeles County Education Committee for Unification. So do I have a consensus to put this on our next agenda so we can vote on that?
If I might, as the other member of the ad hoc committee, why don't we just keep it more general and say, let's review their presentation as it's written, okay? And then we'll make a decision on having a response at the meeting, rather than specify any numerical aspect of it. How's that work?
Okay, that's fine. The more general, the better. I just want to be able to make a decision about that specific thing and certainly talk about the other issues that they brought up.
Okay, good.
So we'll put that on our next agenda. And I did go to the Malibu Library Speaker Series last week. Gabriel Thompson gave a great talk on migrant workers. He just wrote a book, and it's really, he talks about 17 migrant workers in California, and it's he did a really nice talk. And then also was at the panel discussion, and I have to echo Lou, it really was a great event, and kudos to everybody, Malibu Township Council, Malibu Democratic Club, Pacific Palisades Democratic Club, that put it on. We had the experts, we had our congressman, we had people, the president, director of Surfrider Foundation, and our elected officials too, and it was very informative. And then I will be be the first one cheering and voting for SCAG, Southern California Association of Governments, to endorse the bill, and that will be on April 5th. And then I did want to let people know that our next Planning Commission was canceled, and there'll be one the second half of the month. And then also the 30th is, this Friday is the last day for community-based nonprofit organizations to apply for the city's general fund grant program, and you can find those applications online. And then for Earth Month activities, we're co-hosting with Pepperdine. It's going to feature environmental advocate and author Paul Hawken. He's very well known, on Wednesday, April 11th at 7 at Pepperdine's Elkins Auditorium. I hope you are all there, at least. But it's open to everyone, and you can go to malibulibrary.org/library speakers to sign up. You do need an RSVP. And then for Earth Month, we will also be doing on Saturday, the 21st of April, from 10 to 2, household hazardous waste and electronic recycling. And on that same day, we're going to be doing document shredding, and that's always very, very popular. And then the cultural events in conjunction with Creative Visions and the Dan Eldon exhibition upstairs in City Hall. Tomorrow night at City Hall is a free movie screening of The Journey is the Destination. And this tells the story of Dan Eldon, who is a 19-year-old artist, explorer, and photographer who is leading a group of teenagers on a safari across Africa. And unfortunately, he was killed. He was a writer for Reuters, and so it tells about his story. And I really encourage everyone, if you can, to come tomorrow night. And then April 10th at City Hall at 7 p.m. is the Creative Activist Coffee House for Teens, and it will feature a poetry session with Malibu Poet Laureate Ricardo Means Ibarra, and some other poetry performances. William, I don't know if you're performing, but you should look into that. I can give you some connections on that. And there'll be a roundtable conversation on the power of words in social movements and a chance to write and perform your own work. And sorry that was a lot, but I wanted to get out a lot of information. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Skylar, you're next.
Good evening. William, thank you for coming and sharing that poem with us this evening. That was there's been a lot of interesting things in our country, and one of them that kind of ponders me is how we can't get ahead of some of these kind of issues. I appreciate the folks pressing on the issue that's affecting their neighborhood, and I hope that other neighborhoods listen and hear this and see this sort of the challenge that's going on with the Conservancy, and hopefully the Conservancy can, figure out a way to pull back a little bit on what they're trying to do here, and see if there's another access way that they can happen that doesn't impact the neighborhood the way that this is being proposed right now. That's pretty much all that I have, and I will pass it off. Thank you.
Thank you, Skylar. Jefferson?
Also, I support bringing the school stuff back, in a timely fashion. However, the best way that you and Laura would like to do that seems like the best way to go on that.
Okay, great. Jefferson?
Thank you. I did attend the drilling platform issue. It was a terrific forum put on by Malibu Township Council. Lou and Laura and I were there, as was mentioned earlier, but the panel was so well educated and so up to date on all the data that they presented that I think we should be proud of the fact that you see these electeds from other communities coming here to defend us and our community in the ways that they do. I was very impressed with the output and the efforts by MTC and the electeds that came. Moving on, I've been answering a lot of phone calls and some emails about the way the city responds to data in the public service, public works, and things like that, and as well as community updates given to us by the city manager. And I'm going to let her opine on that in just a moment after I'm done and Rick is done. I'm still moving forward with the wishes and the promises that I made during the election campaign for the Ombuds office. I've reached out to Pepperdine. There's a trail of emails an arm's length long, and I've been mentioning it to our city attorney about the Strauss Institute and moving forward with that. So we now have a dedicated person up at Pepperdine doing a thesis on bringing an ombuds to the city of Malibu. And I want to congratulate our new members of the Environmental Sustainability Department, Ms. Shen and your partner next to you. Hi, guys. I'll be coming at you for eventually for an environmental commission that I hope we can establish here at the city of Malibu. And I look forward to working with you on that. And then on Wednesday, 1:30, we have the Adamson House meeting for the board of directors, and we will be talking about the enrichment of the eastern side of the sand depletion that's going on from the tidal change in the lagoon to save the front of the Adamson House, which is the big rewarding financial monster for the Adamson, or the weddings. We don't want to lose the wedding lawn, so we'll have to move forward on something like that with State Park. So that will be Wednesday at 1:30. Thank you.
Thank you, Jefferson. As Laura said, I also went to the Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District Board meeting, and we had some encouraging news. And I would say that, as we told them there, we're cautiously optimistic that we can work something out. And I'd say it's a very positive sign. And we're committed to Malibu having its own school district. Stand by for more details as they come out. It probably will be a lengthy but very deliberate process. I also went to Sheila Kuehl's open house up in Calabasas. I know Norm spends a lot of time up there. The county's got some great professionals. We're lucky that we kind of fall under the in the realm of the County of Los Angeles. That's where our city is, because we have a wonderful working relationship with the county. The county is an interesting governmental agency, and in a lot of the things that we do, and by the way, I'm a county employee, so I'm not just saying that because of that, but they have a very flexible and creative mindset in the way they don't let bureaucratic process slow them down and impede creative ideas, and we're really fortunate. So I was glad to go there and meet a bunch of the professionals and say hi to the supervisor herself. I've also been working on the next gen FAA flight routes thing. There's a lot of things that are happening. I met with somebody from an adjoining neighborhood, not in the city of Malibu, with an aviation lawyer who's the guy who's representing Culver City in their lawsuit that's going to court right now. And we got a lot of very good information. We're going to be speaking to some other people, and I'm encouraged by the fact that Christy Hogan's law firm is now part of a bigger firm that has an FAA guy in Washington, D.C. I just found that out, so I'll be bugging her about it as we go forward. Let's see. As far as I appreciate all the people from Sycamore coming down here, Sycamore Park. If anybody knows what you're going through, and I'll say this until I'm blue in the face, I do. Okay, and it sounds kind of like what you guys are saying is like, hey, nothing's happening. You guys don't care about us. You know, that's not exactly true. We do care about you. They have taken action. They have sent out a notice of violation. Do you want to talk about that at all, Christy?
Not to add to that part, but just to say that the next step then will be action on my part. So we have to go through a preliminary step. So that's what we're leading up to.
Okay, and you know, so it may look like when you're in the bullseye, okay, it's not a very good feeling, and it's when you have Joe Edmiston get in your wheelhouse, it's not fun. I understand that. Okay, we won't forget about you. It may not always look like things are happening to your satisfaction. Don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call me personally at any time. And things are happening, and we will watch it. And please keep us informed about everything that goes on. It's not a small problem. It's not one of those things that we're going to ignore. It's a big deal. It's a very big deal. And it doesn't just affect your neighborhood. It affects a number of neighborhoods throughout Malibu. And we hear you, okay? I know you're frustrated. It looks like things aren't happening. Things are happening, okay? So I just wanted to acknowledge you and thank you very much for coming down here. Let's see. I was invited to the MTC meeting here in City Hall about the offshore oil drilling, which I understand was a success. I could not attend because I had to go to work. And I also was invited to the Malibu Democratic Club meeting, which I appreciate, even though I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican either. I'm a no-party preference guy. And I couldn't make that because I also had to man my post for the County of Los Angeles. But I understand those were both very successful. Journalism majors. I'm a journalism major. I was a journalist for many years. So thank you for coming down and showing your professional interest. It's an exciting world out there. It's completely different than when I went to journalism school. When I went in Journalism 101, we had to sit in front of our IBM Selectric typewriters and, you know, hammer out these it was a kind of funny story, I'll tell you. I was in Journalism 101. The guys who were teaching me they were total Edward R. Murrow guys from, you know, the golden age of, you know, this is London type thing. And the guy would come in and we'd each be sitting in front of these little Selectric typewriters, and he would give us a thing and say, okay, there was a car accident, you know, 2 people got killed, and you got to write a story, and you know, he'd give us like 5 or 10 minutes to tap it out, and then he comes and he says, you know, there was a fire in an apartment building, and we tap it out, and then he came out and said, and President Reagan, who was the president at the time, just got shot by somebody, and we're like, and he goes, oh, by the way, that just happened. We're like, whoa. So that was kind of interesting historical perspective. You may find yourself in the middle of history. It's changing now technologically. The tools that you have at your disposal are what we could only, we wouldn't even have dreamed about them, to be honest with you. The immense capability that you have to reach a worldwide audience from your phone is absolutely incredible, and they didn't even envision it in the Jetsons when we were growing up. So good luck. It's an exciting time to be in journalism. I have to say this. I know everyone's caught up in the old Parkland gun control argument and marching, and there's been a lot about that. But I have to say, as a member of the armed forces for 30 years, that I'm a big believer in freedom of speech, and I think it's great that everybody comes and expresses themselves. And I want just to remind everybody to be respectful of the other points of view. And the First Amendment is backed up by the Second Amendment, and I couldn't help but notice the irony of gun control and the Warsaw Uprising that we recognize. And I don't know what the situation was on gun control in Poland, but those guys probably could have done with a few more weapons at their time. So we have to be careful about what we ask for, and we have to need to be deliberate on the conversation in public, and it's a worthy conversation. There are many aspects to it. It's complicated. It's not a simple thing. So I don't usually like to talk about national political issues from the podium, but it came up. So I just wanted to point out the irony of the commemorating the heroes of the Warsaw Uprising. Okay, that's all I have to say.
More thing then? Thank you, Rick. I did speak Sunday at the Democratic Club meeting, and Lou and Laura were there. And we did have discussions about MRCA in some detail, and there were a number of homeowner groups there. And I encourage you to reach out to the other homeowner groups so that you can have a coalition of effort and trade information among the homeowners groups so that you solidify your position, and then you have more authority when you go in. Instead of with 40 homeowners, you go in with 200 or 300 homeowners. It starts to mean something. So there were a number of other homeowner groups there. I'd say get in contact with them or contact me after the meeting or tomorrow, and I'll give you the heads up on that, or maybe Lou or Laura can help out as well. They were there too. Thank you.
Excuse me, we're on to the consent calendar, and Jefferson wants to pull 3B4 and 3B8, and I think we have a comment on 3B7, so I have two speaker slips for the consent calendar. First I have Ryan Embry, and then John Mazza.
I had a question about 3B4. This is a really, really short report that says, I think it's a 2-year proposed contract for a lot of money to basically figure out a way to spend the $8 million that's accumulated from the library fund, that's public taxes for a Malibu library, if I understand this correctly. This would be a very, very, very part-time kind of a position. I can't imagine how that would equate to over $10,000 a month. I'm wondering if the city did an analysis of how many hours they thought that this might take to accomplish, because I wouldn't want to deprive the kids of any of the money that's supposed to go to the library, you know, by ingratiating some consultant or somebody with this ongoing expense. How can we keep the cost down? Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan. John, be talking on 3B7, and then we'll talk about 3B4 from the podium.
I'm speaking on 3B7, but first I'd like to correct the record on something. The Malibu Township Council put on this event on Saturday at substantial expense. We did offer the city the right to film it. They declined. But we're a 3B504. We're non-political, non-partisan. The Pacific Palisades Democratic Club and the Malibu Democratic Club had absolutely nothing to do with this conference. Now, on 3B7, you're being asked to do a variance. And it's an anathema. I've been coming to meetings for 20 years. I have never seen the city council do a CDP variance before anything went to the planning commission. And to get a variance, you need a CDP to have a variance off of. So there apparently is no CDP before the planning commission. And you cannot build a seawall or a protective device without an associated structure and a OWTS, wastewater system. It cannot be granted. So I do not understand why you're considering this tonight. It should be attached to a planning commission CDP for a building. If you're going to cut out the planning commission on planning decisions, I think you need to come up with some amendment to the LIP on how permits are given and figure it out. But I don't believe without, we have appeal requirements and all kinds of stuff to be doing this, which apparently are not involved in this consent item, which is not even heard or notice to the public. As I can understand it, I don't see the nearest 500 feet houses being notified. I don't see the appeals process. I don't see the CDP. I don't see the anything that fits in our normal system. So I ask you to send it to the Planning Commission and put it back into the normal system. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And Lester, I assume you're speaking on the same topic.
God, I'm glad I showed up tonight for this slam dunk. On December 6th, this project came to the Planning Commission, and we received our CDP. And John and I had a very spirited conversation about wave uprush studies. We talked about seawalls, we talked about the advanced wastewater treatment system and everything. Now, what happened at this meeting was at the last minute, I don't know if you all remember those emails you got on Thanksgiving Day Eve from me when I found out that we were being bumped into the new FEMA flood maps, like before FEMA's even approved them. There was a lot of crazy last minute stuff going on, and at the bottom line was they said, you know, yeah, we're gonna put you in the new flood zone, and it's no big deal, it's just a elevation certificate. And Rob attested to that at the meeting, and our conditions came back, and it was right, you're in the FEMA thing, this is all you gotta do, this flood cert. And then it turns out later in our building plan check or our grading plan check at Public Works, the first plan check correction was, oh, and you've got to get a variance through the city council, which is something, it's a process we do, and this is what's happening. There's no other way around it. We're not unique in it. This is what happens when you're put in a VE zone and you have to have a seawall. And Rob will tell you all about that in a minute, but I want to, when we get to that 3B7 hearing, I want everybody to keep in mind, FEMA hasn't even adopted these maps, okay? And the ordinance that you guys agreed to, that Public Works recommended on October 16th, 2017, was that they would take into consideration the FEMA maps. That's what you guys told them to do. That's what you agreed that they wanted to do. Fine. They took the maps, they did more than that. They took the maps into consideration and they held us to it, and we complied, and a variance is a natural part of this. Now, just really quick to John's complaint, John, you saw it and you approved it, and you and I talked about it at length. And so it does have a CDP. It went to the Planning Commission. The seawall was there. This is an after the fact kind of like, oh, we got to take care of this FEMA thing now because these guys are they're not in the flood zone, but we're going to pretend that they are until FEMA adopts the maps. And we're playing along with this, and this is not a big deal. But I just needed to talk. I wanted to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about here. So, and I'll talk again on 3B7 if I have to, but, you know.
Thank you, Lester. All right, well, let's go ahead.
Well, this is 3B7 now.
Well, let's talk about
We're on
3B4.
3B4.
I think that the mayor took all of the public comment on items on the consent calendar. Is that right? So now we're done with the public comment on consent calendar items, and you can take them in any order you want to.
I just wanted to clarify on 3B4, I just want to make sure that the council understands is we're approving an amendment to the existing agreement that the city has with the County of Los Angeles that allows the property tax dollars that are collected for library services. It extends the existing agreement that we currently have, so we can continue to collect those set-aside funds that are excess to what we spend on our library. So that's the only thing that's before you this evening. It's actually an amazing agreement that the county has provided to us that will be allowed to extend the MOU to 2044. And then on 3B7, I did want to confirm that the Planning Commission did approve a CDP on that project. So I just wanted to clarify those two things.
And Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, can I just throw in one more thing, just because for people who follow planning closely, the word variance has a real meaning in the planning code, and there is a procedure that would require a hearing if this were a variance from a planning standard. This is actually Chapter 15 under our building code, and so it's the same word but a different process. That's why it's not a public hearing.
Okay, so library subcommittee members, have at it.
You read my mind. So this came before Jefferson and myself, the library subcommittee, and this, as Riva said, is a really great thing. We've have an MOU with the library to receive our extra funds every year, and it was supposed to expire, or it had the possibility of expiring with some additional time, and the library, the county library, of which I am an LA County Library Commissioner, came to us and said, no, let's extend this for a really long time. So it allows us to do our library speaker series, to buy extra collections, to keep the library open 7 days a week, to have a security guard there, to do so many of the things that we do, to support other libraries that can barely have enough money to be open 5 days a week. So this was a really wonderful thing, and I wholeheartedly support it. Can I make a motion just for this one? Is that what we need to do? Okay, I know. So yeah, I'll just make a motion so we can discuss it further to move the staff recommendation.
I'll second the motion for discussion. And then I'd like to discuss. I pulled it for a different reason. We have a library survey out there. We're accruing funds in a huge, almost $1 million a year. We're up to 8.5, I believe, or somewhere in that ballpark. And I don't know the exact amount, but so the MOU is one mechanism for us to acquire the money, but now I think it's time for us as a community to start an exploration of what we would like to do with these funds. So that was the reason I pulled it, was to say, come on, folks, it's time for you to get involved with your library system here. We've got a number of dollars. You've got 2 administrators. Laura has been on this thing for many, many years and guided it to this point. And I think we need to start putting our input in, and that's why I pulled 3B4. So thank you. I appreciate all the comments and efforts. Off my list. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I made the second, and I think we have to do everything through roll call.
We will do a roll call. You're assuming that pro tem position really well.
Councilmember Rosenthal?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wagner?
Yes.
Councilmember Lamont?
Yes.
Councilmember Peak?
Yes.
Mayor Mullen?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, on to 3B7, which was just discussed. Are there any comments from the planning department on this issue at all? Or excuse me, Public Works.
So good evening, Council. Do you have any specific questions you want me to?
Yeah, I have a question. Council member, or excuse me, Planning Commissioner Mazza said there's no CDP attached to this variance. Is that true or not true?
No, there is a CDP.
Okay. And can you explain in plain English what this is exactly?
Yes. This property is located in a flood zone, and the flood zone is a VE zone, which is very high hazard zone. Excuse me. And what that does is puts a lot of restrictions on that development. One of them is they have to raise their building above the base flood elevation, at a certain elevation, and then they have to keep clear underneath that building all structures, anything. So it's got to be really clear and open. This property is all within that specific flood zone, and so with this property, they need a septic system in there, and the only way they could put that septic system is underneath the house. And so because of that, they need a variance from this floodplain, in which is something that they're asking. And in these rare instances, that's what we do.
Okay, any questions from anybody now that we have him at the podium or at the mic? Do you have a motion on this item?
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 18-13.
I'll second it.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Rosenthal?
Yes.
Councilmember Lamont?
Yes.
Councilmember Peak?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wagner?
Yes.
Mayor Mullen?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, now 3B8, you had something on, you want to talk about that?
Yes. Last time we went through this last year, I requested several clarification issues, and the council worked with me on it, and they have been, resolved and taken care of and followed up on. I just wanted to make sure that the public is reading this stuff and having their opinions put out there, because the city is presenting all this material, and if you have an opinion on this and you have a statement you'd like to make, I need to hear about it. So at this point, 3B8 is why I pulled it, and I hear that there's no issues and no stipulations made by anybody, and that's why I pulled it, because everybody complains, and I pull it, and we need to talk about it. Here's your chance, and that's why I brought it, and that's why I pulled it.
Anybody have any comments? Have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem Wagner,
Yes.
Councilmember Peak,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamont,
Yes.
Councilmember Rosenthal,
Yes.
Mayor Mullen.
Yes.
Motion carries.
So we just need a motion on the remainder of the consent calendar.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Rosenthal,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamont,
Yes.
Councilmember Peak,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wagner,
Yes.
Mayor Mullen.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Real quick, I was just going to run back to Reva. I think she was going to help us out with something. Is that still possible, or should we hold that off till later? It's just a 1 minute from Reva.
Sure, if I can get Alex to put up this slide. Mayor Pro Tem Wagner had asked me to provide an update to the community about how we provide information on road closures or lane closures that affect traffic, and I want to make sure that everybody knows how to get that information. Our staff spends quite a bit of time pushing out information, and it's only good if people are getting it. So what I have up on the screen is from the city's website. It's our e-notification system, and if you go on to the city's main website, you can scroll down to get to this, and what you can do is put in your email address, and then if you go to the next slide, Matt, thank you, you can scroll down, and there are literally dozens of options of information that you can select to receive. So if you wanted, for example, to get traffic advisories, you would select that, and then when the city pushes out information about traffic, you will receive an email if that's how you've requested to get it. We also send out alerts via text through our Nixle alert system, and so you'll also receive that if you've signed up for that. We also have a hotline that is updated on a daily basis. The number's 310-456-9982, and here we put information about traffic, projects that are going on that might impact people getting through city streets. If there's a utility advisory that we've gotten from Southern California Edison, that will be up here on power outages, as well as any other emergency information. So if there's a fire or something like that going on, this hotline will have that information, and that is, as I said, updated on a daily basis. It does not take messages, but you can certainly call in and get information. But I encourage people to go onto the city's website and sign up not only for traffic advisories, but all of the other advisories. For example, if you're interested in what programs we have going on at parks, you can select that, and that information will be provided out to you as we push it. Information is also available on the city's Facebook page, on our Instagram page, and via our Twitter site as well. So I hope that provides information you were looking for, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'd just like to have that transparency and openness and allow everybody access to it. Thank you for clarification and putting that up for me. Thank you.
No problem.
And the hotline is updated several times a day, from what I understand. We are now on to item 4A, which has been continued to the next meeting, correctly, or some meeting in the future. And then we're on to item 4B. And I'm going to request we have a 10-minute break, and we'll reconvene here at 8 o'clock, if that's all right with everybody else, so we can jump into this. All right? Reconvene at 8. Let me start over then. This is item 4B, and it's for an appeal, number 17010. It's appeal of Planning Commission Resolution number 17-55 at 20272 Inland Lane, and the appellant is Hack Wong, and the applicant is Jonathan Day, and the property owner is the Jonathan L. Congdon Revocable Trust. The applicant and the appellant and all of their representatives will each have 15 minutes total for their initial presentation. And first we get a staff presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. The matter before you tonight is an appeal of the Planning Commission's approval of a coastal development permit for a single-family residence at 20272 Inland Lane. Because this project involves a variance from the city's geotechnical factors of safety, the city's geotechnical staff, Christine, is present to respond to any questions you may have. The subject parcel is located in the Big Rock neighborhood, inland of PCH, located in the single-family low-density zoning district. In 1968, a residence and a garage were constructed on the subject property, as shown in this 1972 photo. The residence was damaged in the Malibu Topanga fire in 1993 and was later demolished. The subject parcel is an irregularly shaped lot and is currently vacant with the exception of a concrete slab and remnants of a septic tank from the previous residence. The lot descends steeply to the PCH to the south, and the entire slope area was restricted as a geological hazard area and is in the active Big Rock landslide. On August 7, 2012, the Planning Commission approved an application from the previous property owner for a new one-story house, including a variance from the city's geotechnical standards for factor of safety. The variance was required because it is infeasible to rebuild a residence in the Big Rock Mesa landslide area in a fashion that would provide the code-required 1.5 static and 1.1 pseudostatic factors of safety. A minor modification to reduce all the side yard setbacks was also approved. On November 6, 2017, the Planning Commission approved an amendment to the project that it included a demolition permit for the slab and septic system, a modification to the design of the residence, and a new detached cabana. An amended minor modification was also approved because the revised project no longer needed the minor modifications for both side yard setbacks, because one side yard setback increased and was no longer reduced. A new site plan review was added to increase the maximum height of the residence up to 24 feet. And a time extension request is also included to change the expiration date of the CDP. It should be noted that the demolition permit is not part of this appeal and is moving forward. The expiration date for the original CDP was August 7, 2014. The Planning Commission approved a 2-year extension to change the expiration date to December 10, 2016. In July 2015, the current property owner submitted an application for a CDP amendment to revise the design of the residence, but did not submit a formal time extension request prior to the December 10, 2016 expiration date. At the time, the Planning Department interpreted the application for the CDP amendment as an application for a CDP extension. The applicant eventually submitted a time extension request, which is included with the CDPA. A 2-year extension of the permit expiration date to December 10, 2018 would provide the applicant approximately 9 months to complete plan check and obtain construction permits to commence the project. To avoid any ambiguity, the Planning Department now requires an applicant to submit a separate written time extension request prior to the expiration of the original CDP when concurrently processing a CDP amendment. The 2 issues that the Planning Commission discussed during their November 6, 2017 hearing were the time extension request and geotechnical issues. As far as the extension request, the Planning Commission generally all agreed that an extension should have been submitted prior to the expiration date. Nonetheless, 4 of the Planning Commission members decided to approve the extension because requiring the applicant to submit a new CDP for the same project would burden the applicant, staff, and the Planning Commission without any substantial benefit or improvement to the project. The Planning Commission also asked the applicant's geotechnical consultant numerous questions about the Big Rock landslide, site stability, the project's potential impacts to geological issues. The geotechnical consultant conveyed that development on this lot in the context of the enormity of the landslide would not have an impact on the stability of the landslide itself, and that dewatering efforts conducted by the Big Rock Mesa Landslide Maintenance District is the key factor in slowing down landslide movement. He also explained that given the depth of the landslide, there isn't a way to meet the geotechnical factor of safety on the subject lot or on any lot in the landslide area. Before approving the project, the Planning Commission added a new condition to the project requiring an annual monitoring report to the district that details the monitoring and maintenance activities on the site. This is a site plan showing the originally approved one-story design that's spread across the entire width of the lot at 18 feet in height. The gray depicts the concrete slab that is currently on the site now, and the red outlines the approved footprint. This site plan shows the amendment footprint. The proposed new design is shrunk into the ground floor, and it lowers the finished floor elevation overall and adds a second story element. The redesign is intended to increase the west side yard setback, which is here, and to improve blue water views for surrounding properties to the north by narrowing the width of the structure and sinking it into the site. This is a comparison of the originally approved CDP and the amendment. The amendment increases the total development square footage, but the overall impermeable coverage area and building footprint of the project would be reduced. The highest elevation of the roof line of the redesigned residence is also lower than the highest elevation of the original structure. This is the full site plan of the property. All development avoids slopes steeper than 5 to 1. Here's Inland Lane, and PCH is down here. The appellant appealed the Planning Commission's decision on the ground that the denial was not supported by evidence and is contrary to law. The issues of the appeal focus on procedural defects for processing the time extension, lack of written CDP findings, insufficient variance findings for a modified geologic factor of safety, lack of consideration of an unpermitted structure on a property adjacent to the subject site owned by the applicant, obstruction of private views, and a design that is incompatible with neighborhood character. As far as the time extension, as previously discussed, the applicant did not submit a time extension request prior to the expiration date. However, staff believes, and the majority of the Planning Commission found, that the unique series of events and circumstances associated with this application warrant granting the extension, and forcing the applicant to submit a new CDP application would not result in an improvement to the project. The appellant states that the Planning Commission did not make required findings for approval of the project, specifically that the project is the least environmentally damaging alternative. Most of the findings made for the original CDP were not affected by the project amendment, but updated findings were made for the amendment as necessary, and are included in the approved Planning Commission resolution and are now included in the City Council resolution before you, including findings demonstrating that the project is the least environmentally damaging alternative. Analysis for these findings are included in both of the previous Planning Commission agenda reports. The appellant states that the findings for the variance for geological factors of safety are not supported by evidence. As part of the application review process, multiple geotechnical reports were submitted and reviewed by the city geotechnical staff for the revised project. The proposed project would result in a higher degree of site and structural performance compared to the previous residence because present-day construction methods, including the pile foundation, improve site and structural stability. The appellant and other interested parties expressed that the proposed understructure grading would cause instability of the slope. Because the Big Rock landslide is 160 acres and 350 feet thick, drilling for the piles and excavation of 6 feet to accommodate the lower level of residence would not affect the massive landslide. In response to the appellant's statement that no factor of safety was identified, geotechnical reports in the record show 1.2 prevailing and 1.4 maximum attainable factor of safety. A condition of approval requires that the property owner to implement a quality control maintenance manual, or QCMM, over the life of the project. The QCMM requires maintenance and monitoring of the site after a rainstorm to check for cracks in concrete and eliminate burrowing animals. The QCMM also specifies that the water line is provided with a flex line, gas line is provided with metal loop, and electrical cables are provided with coil loops to mitigate breakage from creep landslide movement. The purpose of these measures is to limit damage of utility lines and improve overall safety. In addition, other monitoring requirements are in place to eliminate leaks, to reduce groundwater seepage in the event of leaks. The appellant states that drill borings were insufficient. Site exploration included excavating 81 feet on the project site. Given the landslide is 350 feet deep, it would be impractical to drill deeper and would not provide any additional information that could improve site stability. The appellant also stated that the fractures and joints were not described or measured. Staff contends that this description is not necessary because landslides are inherently fractured, which is why the variance is needed. Also, the applicant noted that if there were any excessive cracks or fractures, they would have been recorded and recommendations would have been made. The appellant argued that the Planning Commission did not consider an unpermitted structure on an adjacent property that is owned by the applicant. It is unclear in the appeal why the unpermitted structure would affect the decision of the Planning Commission, but the alleged unpermitted structure at 20270 Inland Lane has no bearing on the application for the CDP at 20272 Inland Lane. The two properties are not tied together, and the proposed project in the subject property is unrelated to the unpermitted structure on the adjacent parcel. A code enforcement case has been opened by city staff, and the applicant has been cooperative and actively working with the city to resolve the issue. The appellant also states that the project unreasonably impairs the view corridors of adjacent neighbors. 3 properties within 1,000 feet of the project site requested primary view determinations in response to the proposed amendment. The applicant installed story poles to demonstrate the preliminary design and redesign the project 2 more times to ensure that the project conforms with the primary view requirements. The amended project conforms with primary view protection standards because the architect designed these structures so that the portions of the structure that are higher than 18 feet in height are behind and obscured by the portion of the residence that is 18 feet in height and lower. The appellant states that the aesthetics and design of the project is inconsistent with the neighborhood character and describes the architecture as ultra-modern. Neither the LCP nor the municipal code contains any standards prescribing architectural style. Analyzing a project's compatibility with neighborhood character includes reviewing the visual impacts of the portion of the project, necessitating the site plan review or minor modification from the adjacent street, neighboring properties, and public viewing areas. And the evaluation also includes conformance to the development standards. The proposed amendment is designed to be consistent with the prevailing siting, mass, and height of the existing residences in the neighborhood. Most residences on the south side of Inland Lane are single-story, but compared to the previously approved project, the proposed amendment is less visible from Inland Lane due to a lower overall roof elevation and smaller footprint. As shown in the north elevation, the ground floor would be visible from Inland Lane, but the lower level would be tucked on the ground floor and be visible from the ocean as shown in the south elevation. The project does not exceed 24 feet in height and is less visually intrusive than the 18-foot previously approved design. The north elevations of both the approved project and the amendment are shown in this slide, and you can see the larger side yard setback for the amendment between the property line and the proposed cabana, and also a corridor between the cabana and the proposed residence. This is a photograph of the story poles taken from Inland Lane, and you can see the story poles behind the existing gate. And these two photographs show the approved story poles from the original CDP and the amendment story poles. These two photos show comparison of the massing for both projects, and they were taken from two locations, but you can see the massing for the approved residence on the top extends further to the west than the proposed amendment. The residence has been designed to appear as a one-story structure from the east and the west, with the lower level of the house tucked below the ground floor. And these are elevations showing both the east and the west side of the house. Subsequent to the publication of the agenda report, we received 4 additional pieces of correspondence. One from a neighbor who had questions regarding private view obstruction, conflicting geotechnical reports, and concerns about aesthetics. One of the applicant's representatives also submitted a response from their geotechnical consultant dated November 18, 2016. A neighbor raised some concerns regarding two-story design and expressed concern regarding potential for rock slides and landslides. And another interested party raised objections to the time extension. Both of these additional correspondence were received today. So in summary, staff recommends that the City Council adopt resolution number 1815, approving CDPA number 15005 and associated discretionary requests.
Thanks very much.
That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. And we'll move to, we'll hear from public comments now. So let's see, the appellant goes first, or does the project go first? All right, appellant, you have the floor. That's Joshua Hopstone.
Yes, good evening, Mayor.
You have 15 minutes, and you may save that for rebuttal, some of that. If you think you might use less, you're free to use all 15 minutes.
Thank you very much. And again, good evening, Mayor Mullen and honorable members of the council. I am Joshua Hopstone, the attorney for Hawk Wong, the appellant in this matter, and the neighbor immediately to the north of the subject property. Thank you for your attention to this case. You can see now that the proposed project before you is nothing like the originally approved project which it is seeking to amend. This is a CDP amendment application. The original structure that was approved in 2012 was a fire rebuild, a construction of a new house on literally almost exactly the same footprint as the house that burned down in the '93 fire. There was a slide up here, something like 90% identical footprint. The proposed structure is completely different. Aside from being much larger and being 2 stories, there's on page 76 of the agenda materials, there's a comparison of other nearby properties in the vicinity. You can see this is a clear outlier. It additionally is built far further toward the cliff, 20 to 25 feet further southward toward the cliff. And most importantly, the approved project was a regular house that sits on top of the surface of the ground like all of the other houses in the area. And this proposal is a subterranean structure constructed directly into the bluff of the cliff. What goes along with that is the approved project in 2012 had a total of 60 cubic yards of grading, 60, and this project contemplates 1,050 cubic yards of grading, including 755 of which is understructure grading. So they're literally proposing to dig a hole the size of a house into the bluff of this cliff and to build a house there. Suffice it to say, there are several aspects of this project and the permit process that has caused concern to my client and the greater community. It sounds dramatic, but for this community at this time, on this cliff, on this active landslide, this proposal to build a subterranean house into the ground really is without precedent. Turning to the geological factor of safety. This is one point everyone in the room can agree on. We're all in harmonious agreement that this project does not meet the legal factor of safety that this city put in place for itself. And it's disappointing to my client to see how casually planning staff is willing to put that aside. But be that as it may, Section 9.3 of the LCP expressly requires written findings, that this project is the least environmentally damaging alternative, and there are no alternatives to development that would avoid or substantially lessen impacts on site stability. So that's the law. It's the law this city has imposed on itself. It has to be shown to be the safest alternative. And in justifying its approval of this deviation from the law, the staff agenda report says that this project would produce a higher degree of site/structural performance than the previous residence that burned. The previous residence was constructed in 1968 prior to modern construction measures. They said that again tonight. This project would be safer than the house that was built in 1968, but that's not good enough. That is not the legal standard. You cannot compare this project to the 1968 house and say that is safer than this, and so that is good enough to me. You need to prove with substantial evidence that there is no other safer alternative available, and you have an alternative before you, the house that was previously approved in 2012 by the Planning Commission, the house that sits on the top of the ground, that doesn't contemplate 755 cubic yards of excavation. If you peek under the covers of the evidence underlying this approval, it becomes evident that the numbers are inconsistent and not there, certified engineering geologist Don Kowalewski is going to speak in a moment to address some of the concerns in those quantitative reports that were prepared by GeoConcepts, the firm that was hired and paid for by the project applicant. Suffice it to say, the data that was gathered in support of this project was prepared in 2011 in connection with the fire rebuild project, the project on top of the ground. They made 4 borings to a depth of 81 feet. This landslide extends to a depth of 130 feet. 2 of those borings showed standing water and 2 others didn't, which suggests a barrier. Inconsistent rock strength and pressure and PSI figures were used that did not align with the numbers employed in the Bing-Yen report in 1992, but worst of all, no earthquake forces were applied in connection with those reports. This is a requirement of state and city law to consider earthquake force projects in a known geologic hazard area, and we are talking about an active landslide. Allow me to be specific. This is section 9.4 of the LIP. It lays out development standards for new construction in a landslide area. It starts by saying that new development shall not be permitted in one of these areas unless the factor of safety is met. The city is looking past that for reasons we've already heard, but it goes on. This is in subsection D2 and 3 of section 9.4. It goes on to say that slope stability is required to consider worst case conditions. It is required to consider the effect of earthquakes, and that did not happen here. So the city is required to consider the impact of what a seismic event may have on a project in an active landslide such as this. It did not do so in this case, and because it did not do so, there is not substantial evidence in this record to support deviation from the safety factors. I want to briefly mention the procedural issue. It's conceded at this point that the application was procedurally defective. The rules require an extension to be submitted in writing prior to expiration. That didn't happen. Staff is encouraging you to consider a sort of a totality of the circumstances based on the CDPA itself, which was submitted in June of 2015, 18 months prior to the expiration, and also what was set forth in the written agenda to be a verbal request. In court, this is called substantial compliance. It technically didn't comply because it wasn't in writing, but no harm, no foul, so we're going to overlook it. I represent a lot of project applicants. I know how onerous and difficult some of these technical rules can be, and I understand how it can sometimes be unfair to face the consequences of failing to comply with the rules. But this rule in particular is a matter of jurisdiction. And again, I will invite the council's attention. This is section 13.10.2 of the LIP, which sets forth the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission over a CDP. And an element to that jurisdiction is that the permit has not expired or been forfeited. So this is not like he was supposed to send in a fee concurrently with the form, and he mailed the form, and then the check came 2 days later. When the permit expires, jurisdiction to further prosecute the permit expires with it. This is like a notice of appeal. If my client didn't perfect his appeal in 10 days, there's no way this council's taking that appeal. It doesn't matter if the appeal has merit or you think my client's a nice guy. You, in fact, do not have the discretion to consider the appeal if it is not perfected. You lose the jurisdiction, and the same goes for a permit application. So I understand that in isolated instances it can be very unfair, but the purpose of this rule is for the benefit of the city. They want the power to deny late permit applications, and to overlook it in this case will set a precedent. It is vesting staff and the Planning Commission with power to pick and choose, and that's not power that they really want to have in the long term. In sum, my client's real concern is safety, safety to him, his neighbors, his property values, and to the public at large. We ask that you deny the application, or at minimum, remand the matter to the Planning Department to make the necessary findings to ensure this is the safest available alternative. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Donald Kowaleski. I'm a certified engineering geologist in the state of California. I was the original city geologist for the city of Malibu. I've been working in the city of Malibu ever since, so I need to keep up with all the rules. This doesn't meet any of the rules I was ever aware of in the past. In the past, when we had a burnout, you could replace a burnout, provided, and it's in your written documents, same story height, same mass, no additional bedrooms, no additional fixture units. All of that is intended so that when you're building there will not make things worse than they were before. This structure is nothing like that. This is basically a new house, and part of this new house is going to be built out over the cliff. The way they build out over the cliff is by digging into the cliff. So they're still on a flat pad, but they've removed part of the top of the slope. That's not allowed in your policies in the past. My biggest objection to this comes to the fact that you're not meeting the minimum state requirements. The state prepared a seismic hazard map for this area indicating this is in an earthquake-induced landslide hazard zone. Because you're in an earthquake-induced landslide hazard zone, you're required by the state to investigate that and determine what the safety factor is. The city's guidelines specifically state, for all structures, you must evaluate the seismic safety. That was not done by Geoconcepts. I talked to Christine a little bit earlier, and he said the reason why it wasn't done by Geoconcepts is they approved it because they were told by the city attorney they don't have to do it. Now, if you're saying that your city attorney can overrule what the state says, state law says, fine. But I need to know that because I deal with clients trying to tell them what's going on. I don't think you do. I don't think you're allowed to avoid what the state says by law that you have to do. Now, early on with this landslide, Bing Yen and Associates evaluated the earthquake risk of the whole landslide, and they indicated in a significant earthquake, this could move a minimum of 2 feet. Now that's the whole landslide. This property is right at the top of the cliff, right at the bluff top. The house next door that was somewhat illegally remodeled, I looked at that for a potential buyer a number of years ago, and like I do with every house if I can do it, I crawl underneath the house to take a look. There were ground cracks that large underneath this house, parallel to the slope, that had dropped about 3 inches. The pool itself in that property was off 8 inches from one end to the other. That property was moving. Now that was next door, so maybe it's not this property, but we don't have enough information. They drilled some borings on this site, but you kind of wonder whether they ever went in, the geologists, because we usually go in the hole to take a look what's going on, because they never describe the degree of fracturing, they never measure any of the angles of the fractures. They also took the boring to 81 feet. Great, but the landslide's 130 feet. State law, the state reports say you must take samples of the slide plane itself to determine the stability. They didn't do that, obviously, because they didn't get to the slide plane. What they used are strengths of rocks that were much higher than what Bing Yen used, and Bing Yen did, in fact, drill holes all the way to the slide plane. They could have drilled holes all the way to the slide plane, even though your planning person said they couldn't do that. They, in fact, can. We do drill holes that deep. We don't send a geologist down there, but we sample all the way that deep. So there's a lot of work they could have done. So from my standpoint, you could have in fact approved a project here that met the minimum requirements of your own policy for burnout replacement. This building doesn't meet those requirements. Not only doesn't meet those requirements, there is no data to justify the fact that this is the minimum alternative or that it's even safe. I really don't see how you as the city council members could possibly approve this project, considering that you don't meet your own policies or the state guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. And Norm Haney, you are next. And Norm, as always, if you would like to retain some of your 15-minute time for rebuttal, you're welcome to do that.
Yes, I'm only going to take 8 minutes, and then the owner is going to have 2 minutes. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about this project, and I want to thank you for your service. I know how many hours you all spend working on this community's effort, and it's appreciated. So I'm going to start off by telling you that we have our team here is the owner, the geologist from GeoConcepts. The architect is here, and our legal advisor is here, Mr. Fred Gaines. So I have a PowerPoint. Is that ready to go? Okay. Okay, basically, this is very hard to read, but the bottom line is that the project meets all the side yard setback requirements without a variance. It meets all the backyard setback requirements without a variance, and all the front yard setbacks without a variance. There is a minor modification, which is basically right there, and that side yard is 7 feet 3 inches. It doesn't make a lot of difference because the owner owns this easement right here, and so it's pretty irrelevant. Okay, you've seen this project. This is an overlay of the previous project that was approved on top of the burnout. And you can see that it moves, the side yard here is 7 feet 3 inches. It goes across the entire pad, and it's entirely 18 feet. This is another view, but I want to show this right here. Right through here is the line, the westerly side of the house. And from here to here is 34 feet 8 inches. And if you remember what I just mentioned, the previous side yard setback was 7 feet 3 inches. And so it's almost 5 times as much. There is a bit of an intrusion here. This cabana, 12 by 10, is 11 feet high. Notwithstanding, the appellant's house is up to the north, and his views are right through this swath. And his views used to be 7 feet 3 inches or over the top of 18 feet. And now it's over the top of an 11-foot high cabana, but most of it is open. This area right here is 13 feet 8 inches. So there's, we'll move on here fairly quickly. This is a better shot of this area through here. These are elevations of the site, and we have cross sections here and more cross sections. This is a 500-foot radius map around the project site, and we'll get into the analysis on what those 40 homes tell us in terms of size. Now, right here, right now. Basically, there are 40 homes. You eliminate the largest 10%, which is 4 homes, and you eliminate the smallest 10%, which is 4 homes. You end up with 34 homes. And if you average those homes, you end up with an average of 2,740. Now, what we're proposing, apples to apples, you don't count the garage, you don't count the overhangs, and you don't count the accessory structures like the cabana, because the county doesn't. So if we're looking strictly at what we're counting, we're looking at 3,337 square feet for the proposed house. The house that was approved by the City of Malibu was 3,084. So the difference between what was approved in the past and what we're proposing is 8%. With regard to the average to what we're proposing is 21.8%. This basically is the same thing that we went through earlier. What we see here is the view corridor for Mr. Wong's house, and you can see that this area I measured is 34 feet 8 inches versus the 7 feet 3 inches. Mr. Wong's property is to the north. It's the darkest there. This doesn't show it very well, but if you saw it close up, you'd see that the view corridor is right through here. This is a view slope analysis for Mr. Wong's house. The slope to the hump, we pushed the wrong one. Let's go back. Okay. The hump in the roof is right here. And this is a little over 5%. And this slopes down at a little steeper than 7%. So Mr. Wong cannot see anything of this house that is higher than 18 feet. In fact, the highest part of the house is 17.8 feet in terms of his view. The portion of the house that is 24 feet is in front, and you can see that if you're in a boat in the Pacific Ocean looking towards the bluff. So we've talked about 80%. We're consistent with the character of the neighborhood in terms of size. I can't help myself when I talk about one of the things that the opposition said, that this house is not like the house that was approved. In fact, it's not. It is much narrower, and it's shoved into the ground. And so it was reviewed as though it was a new project by every single department in the city. We're filing it as an amendment, but the fact is that if it was filed as a new project, it would not go through any more rigorous analysis than this project went through. So how does it benefit the people behind us? Well, we've already seen that the corridor, view corridor, is almost 5 times as much. I've heard some comments that if you dig a hole and put a house in it, then it makes it unsafe. Nothing could be further from the truth. Soil weighs roughly 100 pounds per cubic foot, and you're removing all of that dirt, which is a driving force creating disability. The truth of the matter is, if you could remove the whole landslide, there'd be no landslide. So as much of it as you can remove is beneficial. It actually makes it safer. Where are we in terms of my time?
You have 6 minutes and 43 seconds left.
All right, I'm going to finish up here and leave the rest of it. But this project is, in fact, the least negative impact on the environment when you consider, other than no project at all, which would violate a person's right to a viable economic use of his land. Thank you very much. John?
Mayor, City Council members, thank you for hearing me. I'm a little bit short on time, so I'm going to very quickly just address you guys relative to the process that I've been through. Since we put in this house, and I bought the house 5 years ago, or bought the lot 5 years ago, I've encountered opposition I didn't expect, because when I was talking to the architect, he volunteered the idea of our going down to reduce the view impact on my neighbors, and also to make it more stable and remove a lot of weight from the hillside. He came back from the city saying that the planning department had said that was a great idea, we were going to make it safer, and then I said go ahead with it, thinking that I was going to be a good guy, reduce view impact of my neighbors, and create a safer house than was prior approved. It was also 18 feet across, all the way, entirely blocking the neighbors' views. This is much less as he said. But I really just wanted to say I've met with every single neighbor who I thought opposed the project or had a question, except for one who refused to meet me, even though we reached out by email, knocking on the door, calling, from every representative and from me. I talked to all of them. Many of the people who were opposed originally have removed their opposition to the project, and I do believe this is the safest and best house for the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else speak?
We're going to save the rest of the time for rebuttal.
Okay, very
Thank
good,
you.
Norm. Thanks very much. John Mazza. Oh, did you want? Do you want to do a rebuttal to that? Go for it.
The way we do it is we have the appellant speak, and then we have the property owner, then we hear the public, and then you'll have a chance for rebuttal.
Thank you. John, you have the floor.
Okay, I normally don't comment on projects. In this case, I'm commenting on process mainly. I hope you listen to Don Kowalewski, and I hope you realize that this project is conditioned on the QCMM. Every time it rains 1 inch in a week, they have to survey the house for cracks and do a report to the city. They also have expansion joints on all their utilities. It's moving. Now, I sent you an email, and this comes from the Coastal Commission. This we adopted in 2002. Expiration of coastal development permit. Unless the permit states otherwise, a coastal development permit shall expire 2 years from the date of the approval. If the development has not commenced by that time, the approving authority may grant a reasonable extension of time for due cause. Extensions shall be requested in writing by the applicant or authorized agent prior to the expiration of the 2-year period. Now, there's no variance to that. That's what it is. It's the same as they stated before. What happens if your appeals go 14 days? Oh, it's no problem. But it is. We need a bright line in development, and we need a bright line in planning. We need to know what the rules are. It's not who you like or what the deal is. Now, this project expired December 10th, 2016. They had a ACDP application in, but it was not complete. It was completed on January 6th, 27 days later of 2017. So for 27 days, there was no project. It expired. There was no ACDP. Now, that didn't work, so they came back again and changed the project again on January 19th, 2017. For 8 months, if you take out the middle one that never got heard, the ACP that was completed never got heard by anybody, then they had no permit for over 8 months. Now, what can we do? I mean, Cher went 16 years. We have to follow the Coastal Commission. We accepted it, and we have to let now the staff says, well, gee, we forgot or this or that, now we're changing our program, but that's not what it says. And as the attorney says here, it expired on December 10th. There was no application that came to the Planning Commission for almost 11 months. So how can we judge, is something valid or not to look at 11 months later. And nobody ever asked us how many years to expire. It could have been, extension. That's what we have to decide. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And Arnold Abrams?
Good evening. My name is Arnold Abrams, and with my wife, Joanne, we have been residents of Malibu for the past almost 20 years. We reside next door to Dr. Hawk Wong, and our appearance here tonight is in support of Dr. Wong's petition appeal. The permit, we oppose this project on the following grounds. Number one, the permit initially issued by the City of Malibu already expired, as it was presented by other speakers before me. It will set a very risky legal precedent to extend it. Number two, regarding the proposed structure, we believe that if it fails to provide for safe setbacks, taking into consideration all the past history of that hill, problems with water, problems with earthquakes, and other natural situations. It seems to become an issue of entitlement at this point in time. One last point I would like to state. I would like to express my appreciation to Mayor Mullen and to Mayor Pro Tem Wagner for meeting with the community, with individuals that will most seriously be affected on Inland Lane. And I also remember vividly the words that one of the members of this council stated to me on the telephone during the last election process, that under no circumstances this particular member was going to consider approving any dramatic changes to the character of the neighborhoods, and by allowing the building of a structure that changed the character of a particular area. I believe that you should live up to those representations. That's why many, many, many people in this city have voted for you, and we hope that you give additional consideration to the presentations made by the attorney and the engineers today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Jonathan Day. Jonathan will be followed by Nora Cohen.
Hi, Council. Thanks for coming tonight. I'm Jonathan Day with Kasi Day Architects. I'm the architect of the project. I just wanted to say a couple quick things because I know Norm explained a lot of the technical information, but this is a custom home designed for my client and his wife, and they have a baby now. So it's not a development home. We weren't after maximizing square footage. We weren't after maximizing height so much. So our design concept was, let's make it skinny and narrow so that we actually would avoid issues like this, because we're creating a view corridor for our neighbors. It was important for John to be working with the neighbors adjoining him, and there's been a lot of discussions about the grass area between that they're going to that we're going to create by this view corridor. So that was one issue. The other issue is, with all due respect to John Mazza, getting a permit in the city is very difficult and time consuming. We did a project, it was 18 months in. We had a different planner, Josh Janowitz, who was a part-time staff planner. We were working with the neighbors trying to push and pull the house to meet their concerns. The lapse of timeline was mainly because there was the Christmas holiday, the break of that, but also Josh, who was really part-time and kind of unresponsive to a certain extent. And, he's like, oh, don't worry, we've been at it for so long. We're working with the neighbors. It's all in good intent. And the time lapse after that is because we actually redesigned and pulled the house back another 4 feet from the current position of where we had designed it. So all of this was in good faith of just trying to make a nice project for our clients. Thank you. Oh, by the way, there is a solar component, and that being green and being of 2018 was important, and not designing something from 1960.
Okay, thanks very much. Nora Cohen, you're next. And Nora will be followed by Lindsay Luzader. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name's Nora Cohen. We are, or myself and my husband and my 3 little boys are the neighbors directly to the north of the Congdons. We've been neighbors now since probably 6 years now. Sorry, I'm not so great at this, but let's see. We are not the house with the pool, because we don't have a pool, so that's not our house. But yes, we are directly next to them. So if there's anybody that should have any issue with this construction, it should really be us. We're the ones that are actually sharing the hill with them. We've reviewed the plans. We would never do anything that was against the safety of our family. We hope for this to be our forever home. We moved from New York City, a tiny apartment. We came to Malibu. We started a life for our family here, and this is where we plan to stay. We're very involved in the community. I can't imagine us agreeing to something like this that's right next door that would be harmful and go against the safety of our family. We've reviewed the plans with the Congdons. We've reviewed it with their lawyers. My dad is an engineer. He took a look at it. He was an engineer for New York City. I assure you, we are so for this project, and I certainly respect the history of our neighborhood. We love our neighbors. Our kids run around. We have our Italian grandma on one side. Arnie's actually terrific. Hawk is great. Our kids go and pick fruit at his house. This house will in no way, shape, or form, we do not believe it will at all hinder the look and feel and connectivity of our neighborhood. As you saw from those slides, you can barely even see the house from the street. It doesn't block views. The Congdons have gone above and beyond to make this so beautiful for the rest of the community and to make sure it doesn't impede views. They have talked to everyone. We've, even been helpful in terms of, setting up coffees or whatever and trying to bring the neighborhood together. Like I said, we're certainly for this construction in terms of safety. We believe that it's a very safe plan. I understand we're all about rules and all of that good stuff. As far as everything I wrote down on here, I didn't say any of it. I just spoke from my heart, and that's what I did. Thank you kindly for your time, and hopefully you vote to move this project forward, because we certainly care about it, and it'll certainly elevate our entire community. So thank you so much.
Hey, Nora, I just want to ask one question. Just to clarify, you're the house that is just the next one to the north of this project?
Of this project,
okay,
yes. So we actually share the hill. Those guys that are appealing this do not. They're actually further away.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Can I have 1 minute, please? There is something that needs to be clarified. Can I speak for 1 minute?
Sorry, we're on to the next speaker. Lindsay Luzader, you're up. Lindsay. Hello.
I am Lindsay. Thank you for your time. I live on the street as well, and I think the design is beautiful. And John and Becca have been nothing but great neighbors to everybody. And I think it will make our home a safer place. And Mr. Lamonte, do you know Susan and Robert Ash? They're my godparents. But yes, I think that's all I have to say.
All right, well, there is very concise. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And Rebecca Condon,
Thank you,
you're
Lindsay.
next. Okay, Rebecca's yielding. Next is Brittany Somerville, excuse me. Are you going to speak, Brittany? And Brittany will be followed by Sam.
I will yield my time as well.
All right, Sam's yielding.
Hello. I guess all I have to say is that I fully support John and Becca in building this home. And if anybody knows them, which I don't think you guys do, but they're very lovely people and they're very mindful of other people's wantings and needs, and they're very caring about things. So I can't possibly think that John would choose to do anything that would in any way, just be invasive to anybody's like personal space or all of that. And you guys were talking about their homes being more modern than the rest of the homes on the street. And to be very honest with you, I mean, sure, they're modern, but I think it's a very nice touch to the neighborhood. And there's definitely going to be new developments coming along. I mean, those houses have been there for a very long time. And I don't know, I just think that, a neighborhood is also built with the people that belong in it. And John and Becca are just really amazing people. So sorry, just a little emotional about it. But anyway, yeah, I hope you guys make a great
Thank you very
decision.
much.
Yeah.
Rosemary, you're next. And Rosemary will be followed by, I think that's it. That is the last speaker.
My name is Rosemary Idy, and I've lived on Big Rock for 44 years. My issues are not the view or the beauty of the home, and I have no I don't even know the family. I'm just using my brain. I'm sorry to say that. I can see already part of the house is on PCH. I have lived there for 44 years. I have witnessed a lot of slides, rock slides, tragedies, inconveniences, homebound, waiting on the highway for hours. I just don't want to relive that. And usually it has nothing to do with the view either, because usually structures don't obstruct much of the view. It's the trees. And that's my observation. Okay. And I also oppose the two-story home. It's a bad precedent. My other neighbors might decide, I really want a bigger home. Let's build 2 stories. And here I am sitting in the back. We don't want a new construction, and I hope I have earthquake insurance. I hope a fire will keep us safe, and I hope we can make it fireproof or more fire safe, our neighborhood. So I'm kind of bothered by the modifications, minor modifications. In my book, this is not minor. They are huge modifications. That's the difference. And I'm also bothered by digging into the hillside. I looked at it this morning, and I looked up from PCH. What I saw, I'm not very happy. Many of you have seen the hillside coming down. I have pictures here if you want to see photos from the past slides. You cannot drive, you can barely walk on PCH when that happens. And I'm still hoping to find the geological report on the city's website. There is an annual report, and it has not been posted. It should end in June 2017, and it's late posting. I did contact Fugro, and they said, well, the city should have it, and so on. So I wonder what Fugro would say to this kind of development on Big Rock. I can yield my time to Arnie. Can I do that? I cannot do that. Okay. So I'm basically done. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, Rosemary. And that concludes our speakers.
No, will you offer rebuttals?
Well, our speakers in general, and now we'll have rebuttal from either the
We'll start with the appellant.
or
Although you
applicant.
used all of your time, I'd suggest 2 minutes.
Go for it.
I saved 2 minutes.
City Clerk.
Invasion of my client's registered view corridor, side yard setbacks, neighborhood aesthetics. These issues are important to my client, and so I included it in the paperwork for this appeal. I understand that those are things that are within your discretion. You're entitled to deference on certain issues. They're important to my client, so they're in there. Those are private matters, and I understand that. We're here for safety. We are here to discuss public safety, safety to the surrounding adjacent properties, and safety to the public in general. Mr. Norman made an important, very important concession. I don't even know if it was intentional, right at the end of his speech, saying this project is the least damaging other than no project at all. It's actually profoundly important, and even if it means implicating inverse condemnation, which I don't think he was trying to do, it underscores the legal requirement that this city confirm that this is the least environmentally damaging alternative. Aesthetics, U corridor, those are things you have discretion to consider. Violation of city and state law is not something that is within the discretion of the Planning Commission or this council. You need to find, as a matter of fact, this is safer than the originally approved project. Those findings are not in this record. And as for the permit expiration issue, and again, I represent applicants all the time. I get it. But as for no point in refiling, just a burden on everyone, that's not true. What they're trying to do here is daisy chain a coastal development application permit that was issued in 2012 for a fire rebuild. They have daisy chained that into an amendment from that CDP, and now the daisy chain has been broken. If they're required to submit a new CDP, they're gonna be required to do a seismic analysis. It's required in section 9.4. It's required in the corresponding sections of the Public Resources Code. They need to do an earthquake analysis, which wasn't done in this case because it's a daisy-chained amendment to a CDP for a fire rebuild. This is nothing like the original project, and so it should be denied.
Thank you. Anything from the project side?
Good evening. My name is Mark Barrett. I'm a certified engineer in geologist, and we're working for this project. I did review Mr. Kowaleski's latest report, and there was no new data in that. But they seem to be saying that putting this project is going to make things unsafe, but we're putting this house on piles into the bedrock portion of the landslide, and we're removing approximately 6 feet from the building pad. So they're not removing anything of the bluff face, and they're not encroaching on that. So I just kind of want to make that clear and give you guys a context of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Fred Gaines of Gaines and Stacy. I was a little surprised during all your announcements that you didn't say happy birthday, Malibu. Wednesday is the 27th birthday of the city. And so happy birthday, Malibu. I think that it's important on the geology. We keep getting late hit reports. We had a report from Mr. Kowaleski delivered exactly on the day of the meeting of the Planning Commission. We have another one today, which I object to and ask that you not include in the administrative record. This is clearly a series of last minute, here's our arguments coming in with today no opportunity to respond other than we're in the hall reading it, and that's why I asked the geologist. But ask your own city geologist who has gone through the dozens of reports that have been done here. This would not be recommended to you for approval if the appropriate level of safety and the maximum level of safety was not achieved and confirmed by your staff. And I ask you to do that. What you are hearing today, you know, Mr. Mayor, I haven't agreed with everything you've done since you've been on the council, but the one thing I agree with you every single time is when you say, go talk to your neighbors, work with your neighbors. This is what I want people to do in these cases. And I have to tell you, I don't know if anyone has taken that to heart as much as the Condon family in proceeding with this project. This was a July 9th, 2015 application. We're here in March of 2018, and most of that was going out to the neighbors and working with them. I know you went out to the site. You've seen this side yard from 7 feet to 34 feet that not only benefits the neighbor, but creates this view corridor through, you know, directly from the appellant's window straight out to the ocean that would not be required under any code requirement whatsoever. And so this is an applicant that did, and you don't see all the neighbors. We have a couple of neighbors here, but this is a very active community in Big Rock. If they were opposed to it, believe me, they would be here. The association would be here. Everyone would be here. But he's gone door to door, and he's made accommodations and changes to this project, which is one of the primary reasons why it's taken so long. And to come here, and then what I want to point to you is the opposition that you have here today is not telling you what they want. You just heard it. I'm glad you gave him 2 more minutes of rebuttal, because what he said is, maybe you should approve nothing. And that, because I want you to know what I did when they showed up with counsel at the Planning Commission, is I called counsel. I said, what do you want? What can we do for you? We've accommodated virtually every other neighbor. What can we do? And there was no response. They're not asking us to do anything. They want it to go away. They want to use a technicality possibly to make it go away. Start again. Take another 3 years. As long as it's not there, I get a bigger view. I know someday there's going to be a house there, even if it's only 18 feet tall. You know, I'm going to have some blockage of my view. And so I just want you to dissect what you heard here. No one said, make this change and I'm okay. I'll live with this. It was just, don't do it. And that's after going through to the neighbors and making these accommodations and proving over and over again the safety. That's what I think you want us to do. That's what we're trying to do when we come here and have the neighbors in support, working with the staff to get their support. They're not an easy group to please either. 4-1 vote of the Planning Commission. I'll take that any day in supporting this project. And then coming to you with an appeal where their answer really is, well, just don't approve it. Just let it go. Start over again. That is not what I think you're asking for when you ask applicants, neighbors, to engage the neighbors. You want them to work it out. And over the last 3 years, it has been worked out, except for this very, very last issue. I do want to, here, I'll use the terminology of my favorite new heroes. I want to call BS on this jurisdictional issue. It's not a jurisdictional issue. And in fact, what happened here is they made an application for an amendment to the CDP. And what LIP 1322 says is when you make an application for an amendment, the action that can be taken is to amend or extend the application. And that's what they lived with in 2015 as it was going through the process. And now, after they claim expiration, with an application pending, doesn't have to be a complete application, doesn't say anything about a complete application, doesn't say in your code, if you miss this, you're dead and you're over. We made the application that you would make to get an extension.
Okay.
And that was pending.
All right, we got to hold you to the time frame.
And you can ask your city attorney on that. You don't have to take my word or Mr. Hopstone's. But thank you very much. We appreciate all the time you've taken, and we appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Gaines, for your comments. I think we're now at the council comment stage. Who would like to open it up?
I'll start. Considering it's my
That's
neighborhood,
appropriate.
and I've lived there for almost 30 years. I visited this site. No one invited me to visit it, so I was there by myself and walked through it all. The only person I heard from about this at all was Norm Haney, who called me at 3 o'clock this afternoon. But what I did do is watch the entire Planning Commission hearing on this, every moment of it, and it was eternal. And I have to tell you that ultimately, all of the planning commissioners, with the exception of Mr. Mazza, said the same thing. There were really no findings that they could make that could stop this house from being built. Well, it met everything. As far as the geology is concerned, Mr. Kowalewski is making me afraid to go home tonight. But I see the Fugro people once a month in my driveway. In fact, I just got an email from them. They're coming tomorrow. And they said the land where I live, right next to this place, hasn't moved perceptibly in years. The year of the El Nino was the only one where there was any kind of movement at all, and it was next to nothing. So all this stuff about everything's going to fall down on the PCH, et cetera, I find it hard to believe. In terms of what this house looks like, you obviously did what everyone asked you to do, is to go talk to your neighbors, because I've heard from some of your neighbors since then. And apparently that's what took so long to get all these permits done, you modifying it, et cetera. But the bottom line is, your neighbors that live right next door are happy with this house. So, and in terms of what it looks like, in terms of the neighborhood character aesthetically, as soon as you go down your street there, the house that used to belong to Tom Stout is and still an incredibly unique house. It was built probably 30 years ago. Modern, unique, it was a beautiful house. So this fits into the character of that. That's certainly fine with me. The one thing I would advise you all to do, everybody on Inland Lane, should actually take a look at your drainage, because the street that is a private street is pathetic. And it's full of holes and cracks, and I can't imagine how you're going to control any of the drainage there when it rains. But as far as I'm concerned, I think that this is an excellent project, and we should let it go. Even though I'll have a hard time going to the block party in September.
You're toast. Okay, when you said the private road, is that the one that's kind of like if you take the first turn as you're on your way up?
I think Inland and the Rockport.
The little one.
Are
Okay,
both
yeah, I went
private.
up that one today. That is kind of rough.
And that's even worse.
Okay. Laura?
Yes, thank you. I also visited the property. Actually, Nora, I knocked on your door, but you weren't there. It was last minute. I didn't think you would be. Though I wasn't invited by either appellant or the property owner, though I did get a call from Norm. But I did want to visit it, and I had been there before to Nora's house. So, I mean, I'm interested to hear what the rest of, and I did spend quite a bit of time speaking with my planning commissioner, Mike Pearson, about it, and I did talk to Bonnie. But I'm interested to hear what everyone else said, and I didn't listen to the planning commission meeting, though Mikey told me that I should. And I said, that's why I'm talking to you. So I think that there are some issues that I understand coming up. I think the geology issue does concern me, though I echo what Mike told me, which is this has been vetted by our geologists and engineers and project engineers, and so I'm not an expert, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a geologist, I'm not any of that. I have to be able to rely on those people to tell me if something is safe or something's going to work, and if as a council member I can't do that, then what and who can we rely on for these issues? So, and Lou, maybe you know this better than staff does, but since I know the wells were put in, were they all put in at the same time, or were they put in at different times?
There were two stages of them.
That's what I thought.
And
Okay.
they work incredibly well.
And have there been any slides since the second stage has been in, that you know of?
Not that I know
Lou
of.
used to be the president of the property owners before he was elected to this council, so there haven't.
So I got a demotion, actually. I actually used to have power.
So there haven't been any.
Not that I know, but there's a gentleman here that probably can answer that
Oh,
question
that's
for
right.
you.
The real scientist. Thank you. So have there been any slides since the second wells were put in?
There have not been any slides, or I should take that back. The Big Rock Mesa slide is a very large 160-acre landslide, as everybody knows. It encompasses the entire mesa, and it is monitored for movement through slope indicators that are installed throughout the mesa, as well as several vertical dewatering wells that pump water out of the ground, as well as gravity drains on Pacific Coast Highway that drain water out through gravity, and it's manifolded and taken to storm drain. So as Councilmember Lamont said, the rainy years of 1995, 1998, and 2005, the mesa did show some movement, but again, movement is in tenths of inches. There's really no surface manifestation of any of the deep-seated movement on the rupture surface of the Big Rock Mesa landslide. So in a nutshell, since we've had several drought years, with the exception of last year. From my summarizing all the yearly monitoring reports and looking at them recently, there's been very small infinitesimal movements, if any, over the last several years on the Big Rock Mesa landslides. Now, obviously, when we get periods of heavy rainfall like we've had this month, we do have surficial instability on the bluff where we do get small rock slides and mud and debris flows, but they're handled by Caltrans, and that's a surficial problem that this project will mitigate on its own lot, because there will be a very detailed drainage plan that's going to direct drainage away from the bluff or in non-erosive devices. So, in a nutshell, no.
Okay, and just one last question. Mr. Kowalski brought up, I think it was you, the issue of earthquakes, and that you have to study them and look at it, and that it was not done for this project. Could you opine on that?
I'd be glad to, sure.
Thank you.
This project was a burnout in the 1993 Malibu firestorm. And if I could give you a little history, I've been working here for over 20 years. And in about 2006, 4 years after the fire rebuild guidelines sunsetted in 2002, which enabled fire rebuild victims or people who lost their homes in the firestorm of 1993, they were able to rebuild without demonstrating long-term stability. Then building official Vic Peterson, myself, as well as Craig George, the current building official, had several meetings with Christy Hogan's office, the city attorney, and basically we discussed the fact that there were homes here at one time before the fire destroyed the properties, and in reality, conditions hadn't changed after the fire. So for the fire rebuilds, we did have a couple applicants up on the Las Flores Mesa landslide, which is a lot smaller but a lot more active landslide than the Big Rock Mesa landslide. We had 2 property owners come in to want to rebuild after the fire rebuilds sunsetted. And the city attorney opined that they had a legal right to build a house that was there before, and that conditions had not changed. So thus, with the new LCP in place, we allowed these applicants to apply for a variance under Chapter 13.26.5B of the City of Malibu's Local Coastal Program and Local Implementation Plan. And what that variance states is that the granting of such variance will not be detrimental to the public interest, safety, health, or welfare, and will not be detrimental or injurious to the property or improvements in the same vicinity and zone in which the property is located. So basically what had to happen is that they had to demonstrate that the intent of all these portions of the variance were going to be met. And we did that by deepened foundations, rigid foundation systems, drainage plans that took drainage away from any hazardous areas, the development and implementation of a quality control maintenance manual, which we had talked about extensively tonight, and the signing of a hazard waiver. Simply because, as we know, in Big Rock, you cannot demonstrate long-term stability under current city guidelines, which means they have to meet a 1.5 static factor of safety and a 1.0 seismic factor of safety. The landslide is 160 acres. It encompasses over 300 homes, and it's up to 350 to 400 feet thick. And under this property, it's actually not 130 feet thick. Based on the cross sections that I looked at today from the Bing Yen study of 1991, the slide's over 200 feet thick here. So obviously we can't demonstrate stability, but in our opinion, we approved this project based on the fact that they meant the intent of the variance. We imposed several conditions on them to make this house as safe as possible, probably safer than some of the old homes that were built originally in the 50s and 60s. We're very comfortable with it. And to answer your question, making a long story short, they did not have to do any type of stability analysis as long as they met the intent of this variance.
Thank you.
Skylar, you're up.
Oh boy. I think that my questions sort of surround some of the geology stuff, of which I by no means am an expert. But if our city geologist is saying that the project is okay, and he thinks that it's safe, that's I guess we have to go with that. I don't know. It seemed that Mr. Kovaleski brought a lot of very valid points up in which I don't see how, I guess, is it even possible for them to meet the safety factor that they're supposed to? I don't know who to direct that question to. Am I hearing that that's not, there's no way for them to meet that with this project? And then it sounds like the project went through all the proper review channels, and that the Planning Commission heard the amended project as it is now, before it's before us, and that they came up with a conclusion that should be approved. But I just don't know how they did that based on the fact that it doesn't meet any of the safety criteria.
I can answer that, Councilmember
Okay.
Peak. This is Chris Dean again, the consulting geologist with the city.
Great.
You are correct, and Don Koleski is correct in that this project does not meet the intent, or excuse me, the requirements, the minimum requirements of our city guidelines from December of 2013. None of the houses on this mesa, I don't know how many there are exactly, 300 maybe, several of them burned in the 1993 firestorm. None of the homes meet the minimum required factors of safety for new development in the city of Malibu.
Have there been any new homes built up there during this time that have been approved under a similar sort of amount of scrutiny and the same questions were raised?
Yes, we have recently approved a burnout lot on Pacific Coast Highway under these same variance guidelines, but that is the only one to my recollection.
Was there one in 96? Sorry, I believe there was one in 1996 as well that was approved and built.
If it was approved in 1996, that was under the 1994 Fire Rebuild Guidelines, which is a separate set of guidelines that was established by the previous city council.
We do have a slide showing a table of all the homes that were built post 1999 that range from 1996 to 2000.
Is that slide up right now? Because there's a little bit of delay on the video.
It is now showing.
Are you talking about a page from the staff report?
I don't know off the top of my head if it's in the staff report, but it is showing on the screen now.
Okay, well, it'll show up for me in a second. And then my other question is just, in hearing from the neighbors, it sounds like a handful of them are opposed and a handful of them are supportive of it. But I don't see how that really weighs on this situation, because the Planning Commission said that the property meets sort of all of, any view criteria or anything like that. And it seems like the applicant has been super cooperative in doing their best to remedy some of the concerns of some of the neighbors. And that was also very much evidenced by what the architect's statement was and the property owner. So I think for me, it's a real concern over the safety. And the question for the engineer, is that something that should be approved or shouldn't? And is it possible for them to meet the safety criteria there? I don't know why this isn't considered a new house. And I hear very much what Mr. Mazza and other folks have brought up. And in fact, that it's sort of black and white in the fact that the project was, the permit expired. Now was the applicant, this may be a question for the applicant, were you under the direction of whoever the planner was at the time that you did not have to come in and apply for the extension or renewal on that, or why did that not get done? maybe somebody else can answer that, but
Yeah, they indicated that that was their impression.
that was their impression. Okay, that's sort of what I got from. I got a call from Norm Haney earlier today. I didn't hear anything other than basically what was in the staff report about that, and I also got a call from Mr. Mazza, but he sent an email to everyone that's in the record that outlines what he was saying. So, and all of that information was obviously available to the Planning Commission when they made their motion to approve it. So it sounds like if this were to be sent back, all that we would be requiring was like essentially what you're going to ask for more engineering work to be done, and they're going to not be able to come up with that factor of safety. That was a question for the. Sorry, that was kind of a comment, but within that is a question of, is it possible for them to come up with that status or not to make it safe? Meet that.
Are you asking if they can meet the minimum required factors of safety for new construction?
Correct.
No, they cannot.
Like it's not possible in that area no matter what.
That is correct. The landslide is up to 350 feet thick, and it encompasses 160 acres. And I can show you, I don't know if you can see it, probably not, but if you take a look at the assessment district map, the Big Rock Mesa Landside Assessment District map. Yep. Sorry, this may not work, but the area outlined, and I can pass this around if people would like to see it. The area outlined in this yellow line is the active portion of the Big Rock Mesa landslide. You can see how many homes, the little rectangles in here, encompass the mesa, and we're talking about one little postage stamp piece of property within that 160 acres. So the answer is one house can't stabilize this landslide.
One house can't make it fall either.
I'm sorry, repeat the question?
And is the other side of that one house cannot make it fall either?
That's correct, in our opinion, based on the analyses that were done.
Okay, I do see the map too. Thank you. It's finally coming up now. There's a little bit of a delay on the video. But in Christie, where does the liability for approving these kind of projects land in terms of what's the city's, responsibility for that when we're going, essentially what I'm hearing is sort of against the state regulation that requires this minimum, threshold of safety, which we've also adopted. Where does the liability fall in that if, God forbid, there's a very extreme slide or something? I believe that there was one of those that happened, I think it was in Laguna or somewhere else, maybe in Orange County a long time ago, where the city was on the hook for a ton of money. If you could shed a little light on that.
I think what you're talking about is when a public road eroded, and in that case, what they found was that the construction of the road had undermined the stability of the area, and so the city's construction was actually responsible for that slide. But there was a case out of Rancho Palos Verdes that corrected us, being the community of cities that have hills, that we couldn't require a 0.15 or 1.5 factor of safety as a bright line rule, which is what we had.
I remember us talking about this in something, and I don't remember what the other hearing was.
Right. That we bring it up every time we have to, because it makes things more complicated. It's easy to have a bright line, so we can't do that. So instead, we turn to Christine and his expertise to take a hard look at whether or not the proposed construction is going to end up creating a nuisance. It's going to likely fall on a neighbor. And as long as Chris is using industry standard and his best practices and looking at data and not ignoring any facts, then we've done everything that we can as a regulator to make sure that we're approving things that are within our guidelines. And then after that, it's up to the property owners who understand that we're doing the best we can, and that it's not a risk-free situation, And that's why we have the slide waivers.
Okay. All right. I will yield to the leaders of the city, the mayor and the mayor pro tem.
Thank you, Skylar. Jefferson, you're up.
Thank you, Rick. I did have a couple of disclosures to make. I went to the site this morning and inadvertently ran into a number of the homeowners, and I was corralled up to Mr. Wong's house and met with 6 or 7 neighbors there around 9:45 this morning. And when Rick got there around 10:15, 10:20, I departed. And then I met with Norm Haney this afternoon for about 15, 20 minutes on the same project. So those are my disclosures. I did go through this with a lot
Councilor
of
Wagner, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can I
not
just
learn anything new. Right, so I didn't learn anything that wasn't already here and what staff provided me. So prior to that meeting with both of the parties, I made some note cards and moved through this process of coming up with some kind of hopeful decision for us. And I kind of put it 1 through 6 as the appellant had listed in his wish for a denial of the plan. So I went through one, the permit application is procedurally defective, and that's stated on page 4 of 10. Expired number 13.21, and a verbal okay or a verbal assumption of that does not defend a city. And Mr. Gaines could probably opine on that, as well as another attorney could probably say that you can't move forward if you've lost a timeline in there, even if it was only 27 days. 1 day meets the guideline to a good attorney of saying, no, that appeal should be honored. And so one I find is my decision on appeal item 1. Then also in item 1, I found that the proponent, he did fair work. He tried to comply with major needs that were submitted by the homeowners in the area 3 times. He did change plans at his cost. And equally, he spent a great deal of money changing plans and trying to modify to meet neighborhood standards, not on design, but on what the neighbors were talking about, which was the view. So he did a great deal of work trying to accomplish the view, and I think he did that pretty well. I looked through the plans, and certainly the view would be nice there, the way it's planned. Moving further on, when the view was considered, I also thought of the landscaping, which I mentioned to Norm Haney, that the landscaping might be part of a view shed issue further on down the line. And I said to Norm Haney, maybe you should put that in the plans, because I didn't see a landscape palette, so I didn't know what to expect in the way of landscaping going over the 11 feet elevation of the cabana. I think it's the cabana is the highest point. So I would suggest that that would be part of a future plan. Now moving on to staff responses in appeal item 3, insufficient LCP variance findings for required geological factor of safety. As our city geologist has stated, that the 350 feet of slide is something that nobody's going to stabilize. It would take an equal mountain on the other side to stabilize this slide. And so when you take tens of thousands of tons of soil and it's going to go somewhere down on PCH, it's going to take years to get there. And I read a report separate from all of the reports that are here that said we've had 1 inch of movement in the last 10 or 12 years there. So I'll find that somewhere again, but it's similar to what the city geologist said, that the thing is still moving somewhat. So for me, as an administrator, I say, okay, the property's moving, the hillside's moving, 350 acres is moving, or something to that effect. They're not going to stop it. So you add 75 to 100 tons of house, and you take away 75. How many cubic yards are they removing? 1,000 cubic yards?
I think it's 755.
Okay, 750 cubic yards, and you put in the equal weight into it with a house and support and infrastructure, and to mitigate the geological hazards. It's the same weight, so if you put a balance up there, you're taking some weight out and putting another weight in. So it's equal. in my mind. Is it fair enough to say something like that?
Actually, replacing earth, which has a unit weight of about 120 pounds per square foot, and you replace it with a structure, you're actually removing driving force, as Norm mentioned earlier. So you're actually lightening that load on top of the bluff and on top of the landslide by doing that removal.
Right. So I was trying to find a balance here as an administrator and somebody making decisions and trying to find a way to find balance. You take something out, you put something in, it's somewhat equal. The next issue is the engineer stated the Planning Commission found that the site design and construction measures that will be implemented as part of the proposed project will produce a higher degree of site structural performance than was before. So we're talking here in the staff response on the bottom of page 6.6 of 10, that the staff identifies this. This is the staff finding. I recognize that. It's a good note. I think that needs to be entered into in decision making as well. Then further on down on the staff response on page 8 of 10, the evaluation also considers conformity to development standards, which as square footage, setbacks, height, and massing, 2/3 rule. When the projects are visible from the public viewing area, the LIP Chapter 6 requires conformance to earth tone colors. So I didn't see that in the palette either. So I didn't see landscape palette, I didn't see color palette. Correct me if I'm wrong. Are these things that I can find in the staff report?
The color palette is generally identified on the construction drawings, and so we review that when they start plan check.
Okay, because what we were provided, it's not indicated.
Right.
So I'm questioning that. If we can put that into some kind of decision in the future, I would appreciate it. So I didn't see it, so I'm just mentioning it.
Okay. And then landscaping, they do have a landscape plan, right?
Well, there's actually no landscaping proposed because that would introduce additional water on the site. So
that's why I didn't find a landscape palette.
Right.
Thank you. So for me, those are where my couple of issues were. And then to be responsible for a whole city, and the city attorney has mentioned that this huge slide is something that takes years for us to identify and years for us to deal with. I didn't hear anybody say, what about a hold harmless clause by the proponent of the project? Is that something that we can ask for, a hold harmless?
Yes, part of our conditions of approval is that before permit issuance, they have to sign and record at the City of Malibu an assumption of risk and release for geotechnical hazards on the property.
So that's part of the whole issue, is that we're going to receive that as a city.
That's correct, before permit issuance.
So that that takes responsibility away from the city somewhat, but to a good attorney, it's just you indicated it, you identified it, now you're part of it no matter what, depending on which attorney you hire. So I find a number of complications here that can't be fixed and can't be dealt with, and I'd like to hear from Rick.
I take these appeals very seriously. It's a lot of work that goes into both the project and concern for the neighbors, and I've read the whole report. I know I'm not necessarily have to say this, but I want everyone to know that I received information from Mr. Wong and other neighbors, a lot of them that are in here. I met with Mr. Wong and his neighbors today. I reached out to him and said, can I meet with you? He didn't ask to meet with me. He sent me stuff and he asked me, did I have any questions by a thing? But I said, I want to come meet you. So they were kind enough to meet with me today at 10. That's when he stumbled onto the party. And I called Norm Haney, who's representing the project, and asked to meet with him also. And right after I met with them, I went over and talked to Norm. And I take these things very seriously. And I hear the comments from the longtime neighbors, and preservation of the character of the neighborhood, very important to me. Very important. I take that stuff real seriously. I understand the strong feelings about longtime residents when there are changes in the neighborhood. and I hear you. Okay. I also, as I've said many times, Fred, you nailed it. I appreciate the fact that when people are making a change to a neighborhood, and there are longtime residents, who many of them who've been there for decades, that they actually take that into consideration and, as much as possible, be sensitive to it. And if they actually make changes to the project physically to accommodate the concerns of the neighbors, that's impressive. And I think that's the kind of thing that makes for good neighborhoods, is people being conscientious. And I've said this before, it's corrosive to a neighborhood when somebody comes in, buys a property, builds a big thing, and doesn't even introduce themselves to the neighbors. That seems kind of weird. I think that's not what we're talking about here. I have a bunch of questions, though, so I want to get started with that. One question I had, and this was brought up when I spoke to Norm and when I went to the property. Oh, and by the way, after I met with the appellants, I went down to the site itself, and I happened to meet Mrs. Condon, and she invited me into the house, and we spoke about the project, and I got to see it from the perspective of her property also, so I appreciated that. And one thing that somebody mentioned when I was there, and Norm mentioned, was, talk to me about, can you explain when you said something about you accommodated an easement for the neighbors? It's where that cabana thing is. What is that all about? It's like that where the view corridor is. It's some accommodation for the neighbors, and could somebody explain that to me?
Mr. and Mrs. Condon were trying to work with the neighbors to the north, and also to facilitate a larger view corridor for Mr. Wong. And so they granted an easement for recreation purposes and for the cabana and some flatscape facilities, and they really took care of two neighbors at the same time in terms of meeting their concerns, or at least they satisfied one. The other one apparently doesn't want any house at all.
Okay,
but
so
they made an effort.
A quick question about that. So when you say gave them an easement, so whose property is it on, and the cabana, who uses that? The new house or the neighbors?
John, would you?
We still own the property, and what we're granting the easement for use for, sorry, my fault.
No transfer of property.
Yeah. There's no transfer of property, there's just an easement so that there's open space and no house there, which was one of the things we talked to the neighbors about, because they were actually quite opposed to the old project because it was so huge and so close to their property line. So the first thing we did was go talk to the neighbors and give them our idea for increasing the view corridor.
Okay, when you say easement, it means it's like a spot on your property that kind of remains open, so that there's not a house right next to them. But it's
Correct.
not they come and use that property and physically do things on it.
So yeah, they can use the property also. So we're allowing them to use that property also.
Really?
Yeah.
That's quite accommodating. Thank you.
Okay.
I mean, that's what I was reading, and I just wanted to clarify that, because I don't think you guys emphasize that quite enough. I think that seems like a fairly significant accommodation for the neighbors. Okay. Restrictions on amended CDP and the daisy chaining of CDPs. Can you, maybe Bonnie, talk about that at all? In other words, it sounds like there was a permit granted because of a burn, and then there was an amended CDP that was kind of associated with that. And I think someone's making the contention that, hey, that's not a burn replacement. That's actually a whole brand new thing and should start from the beginning. Can you talk about that?
Yes. The application that was originally processed by Mr. On in 2012 for planning purposes was a CDP for a new residence, because so much time had passed since the burn. The geotechnical considerations are a little different for the purposes of that review. But it was a CDP for a new house. When Mr. On sold the property to Mr. Congdon, there was an extension granted in there. The chronology's in here. There was a 2-year extension granted. Mr. Congdon got the property and then wanted to make some design changes to the original house, which was 18 feet and took up the entire width of the property. He submitted a CDP amendment application to amend that previous new single-family residence that was 18 feet high in 2015. As the expiration date of the originally extended permit was approaching, staff was about to take the amendment to a public hearing. We interpreted the amendment application to be also amending the design and extending an extension request to extend the expiration date. So that was submitted and in the door well before the expiration of the original CDP application.
Okay, and that gets to another question, which Mr. Gaines said. He referenced when you put in a CDP amendment, there's language in there that can extend your permit, correct? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. This is for the geologist. Can any house be built on Big Rock that meets these like stability requirements you're talking about? I mean, so let me rephrase that. If we were to enforce the letter of the law in terms of the numerical requirements for stability for this house, is it safe to say that, which means that it's not stable, that no new house could be built anywhere on Big Rock? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. This, because of how large it is, and obviously how deep it is, how thick it is, there's really no grading or engineering, steel and concrete's remedial or repair scheme or stabilization scheme that could meet the intent of our 2013 guidelines and the minimum requirements for the 1.5 static and 1.0 seismic factor safety.
So by it, he means the slide, not the house.
Right.
Just so we're clear.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
If
yes.
somebody's ever reading this transcript.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
No, but within that whole slide area, what's true for this home would be true for anything within that slide area.
For any home in that slide area, yes, that's correct.
Okay. A few more questions here, or comments, maybe I should say. One thing that I look at when I look at this whole, we're talking about this neighborhood character, neighborhood standards issue, and we haven't really resolved it in terms of what we're going to do for the future. It's still in the works. What I look at is, and I've used this expression before, and I think it was the original intent of when Malibu became a city, is incremental growth of a neighborhood and not quantum growth. If you're driving along a street and you see a bunch of houses that have been there for 10, 20, 30 years, and they're of X size, and then you come across something that's like, what's wrong with this picture? That type of increment, that kind of quantum change. So when I look at this square footage of this compared to the original permit, it's not that much bigger. It's a little bigger. It's like 280 feet, I think, is the difference, or something like that. So that's not, and I appreciate you doing the analysis of the square footage of the homes within a 500-foot radius, and it's not a quantum difference in size. Additionally, as far as height goes, it doesn't stand out above the others. It's designed sensitively, as far as I can tell, for the neighbor's view. Big Rock has a beautiful view of the ocean and of Catalina. And when I went to Mr. Wong's house, I was standing in his window looking out, and I said, okay, because the story poles aren't there anymore. I said, where would the house come up? Because he can see the ocean, and then he can see Catalina. And he said, it comes about halfway up the ocean. I said, so you can still see Catalina, correct? And he said, yeah. Okay. So that's pretty good. I think you have made a compelling and convincing argument that the view corridor and the easement that you're, letting your neighbors use your property, to me makes the house, compared to the original one, the original permit, it's a smaller house visually. It looks like a smaller house. The neighbors have made a big issue about it's a two-story house. And okay, I get that. If you were to go in a neighborhood of a bunch of one-story houses and all of a sudden there's a two-story house, that would be a big difference. But it's not really visually a two-story house. It's a one-story house and it's been dug down. And the contention is that that sets a bad precedent for the neighborhood. I would say, that kind of monkeying around with the land form, it sets a bad precedent if you're doing something that changes the contour of whatever, the ridge line or something, but it's kind of conforming to it. Well, one of the things that was brought up when I was speaking to the neighbors, and I really appreciate them meeting with me and telling me all their concerns, is that they said, it sticks out, it's on the bluff. And I was thinking to myself, because I'm not that familiar with Big Rock, although I was across the street, that it was like, this is the bluff here and it goes straight down and it's sticking out. But that's not really the case. It's kind of, you get to the flat part and then it gradually goes down. And I thought that it would stick out in like a sore thumb and you could see it from PCH, and I don't think it's even visible from PCH, from what I can tell. I don't think it is. So that was not as convincing an argument once I actually walked the ground and actually saw it. And I was impressed, or I should say, surprised at how small the lot is, actually, and how much that you're able to do with that small lot by going down and not up. And I think that's being very sensitive to your neighbors. It seems to me that what you have done at every turn is be sensitive to your neighbors. You've given them an easement next door. You've accommodated their views across the street, and I think that's impressive. So that's when I look at neighborhood character and changes to that. I'm very sensitive to people that have lived there for a long time, and there's a natural kind of resistance to it, and I go through it myself. I live in a house that's 50 years old. I pitched in with my neighbors to buy a lot so somebody wouldn't build a house, and I tried to do it again, and somebody else is building another house. So I know that. I've been in your shoes, and I know what you're going through. But I think when I look at what this gentleman has done is he's really been quite sensitive to the concerns of his neighbors. He's not building something that stands out like a sore thumb. Architecturally, I would say it's certainly more modern, no question about that. But we don't really have like Palos Verdes type codes where, you will be this kind of Spanish type Mediterranean thing in this neighborhood, whatever. We have an eclectic deal, and there's no rules against that sort of thing. So I come to this argument with a bias towards being a pro-incremental growth and changes to neighborhoods and anti-quantum growth and standout changes that really negatively affect a neighborhood. And I'm very impressed with people who are sensitive to their neighbors and reach out and accommodate them. I think it seems like you've done that. So all the geology and everything, I think that the point you made is everywhere in Big Rock has the same problems. It doesn't really jut out from the cliff and creep down. When I first heard about it, it sounded like it was sticking out and it was going down, and then the thing next door it's been there for a while, and it's not even going down as far as that building in question next door. So in my view, this I have to agree with the planning commissioners. Okay, and I spoke to every planning commissioner with the exception of Jeff Jennings, and I said, give me your thinking. Talk to me about this because I have a great respect for all those guys. They do this all the time. They go through it. And the one thing that was where John Mazza voted against it, and I respect John immensely, is he said, hey, the permit expired. But I feel that that's kind of a, I don't want to have a world where permits go on and on and on forever, but clearly the applicant was in the process. He was working with the Planning Commission. I'm convinced by what you said that by putting in a modification of the original permit, that it was, if in your many dealings with the Planning Commission and the challenging amount of time that you have to go to, if somebody had said, hey, sign this extension request, you probably would have done it. So I think in the spirit, maybe not to the letter of the law was held, but certainly the spirit was there. And I'm not that convinced that the expiration of the permit was that egregious. So I have to agree with Lou, and I have to say that in my view, after careful consideration of reading everything, of listening to the neighbors, of being a strong proponent of the preservation of neighborhood character and of new people building things, being sensitive to their neighbors, I support this project, and I agree with the planning commissioners, and I would agree with Lou. So that's my comment on it. And I make a motion that we deny the appeal and adopt the resolution. Yeah.
I'll second that.
And do we have any more comments?
Yes, we can now open for continued discussion now that it's up on for a vote. I'd like to add into that possibly that the color palette retain tan or brown so that it doesn't look so obtrusive if it's white, like the house that's there now next door, because it's in a dirt hillside. And if it's a dirt tone color, it's going to be a lot less visible from the highway, because if you sit down at Moon Shadows and look up, you see the properties, and there's a white house and then a lower one a little below that. I think it's something that we should consider. I know Bonnie mentioned that it's later on in the design factors, but I didn't see it, so I just wanted to address that.
The Chapter 6 of the local coastal program, local implementation plan, has requirements for projects that are visible from scenic areas such as PCH, that they be earth tone and have non-glare glass and things like that. Since this project isn't visible from PCH, we did not include that condition that it be earth tone.
If you go down to the Moon Shadows parking lot, sit against the fence and look up, you can see the houses that, well, it's the Moon Shadows is PCH. You're seeing it.
The house you're looking at is mine, actually.
No, the white one.
Yes.
So, you see the houses that do come out a bit from the highway.
There are some houses along that stretch that are visible, but we tried really hard to, see the story poles when they were installed, and we weren't able to see them.
Okay, I wasn't using binoculars either. Okay, well, I'm mentioning this as for discussion because I feel that that's something in the future we need to really install. Also, is there anything about future planting and landscaping, because you've given a corridor to Mr. Wong between the cabana and the fence that already there. The fence is 6 feet high, and I think that's to code, the one that's in front, the one that goes along the side. So that area that has been given as a view corridor, will that remain that way? Is that something that can be modified after we give them a permit?
It must remain that way. There's evidence in our files documenting that the applicant will not install landscaping as part of the project or in the future.
So the understanding is that they will have that view when the house is completed.
That's right.
Yeah, and it won't change when they put trees up or hedges or things like that.
Right. They are not allowed to put in trees or hedges.
Okay.
Oh, also, once the house is built and everything, the Wongs can get a primary view determination, and then that will be their view forever.
Right.
And that
That
goes,
was mentioned.
That goes through the city, so.
Yeah, that was mentioned in this, in all the reports. I'm just making sure it's there so that there's some surety in the future.
Well, that's part of the law of our city, though. When we
Yeah,
did.
I get it. Thank you. And then another issue for me on the final comment is, although it doesn't affect the permit, we have a homeowner here that has modified the use of his property, and now he's in for code enforcement. Is that something you can stipulate to modify the use of that existing property because it's the same owner? And now he's in code enforcement with the 1,000-foot structure.
The property next door, we have opened a code enforcement case, and the property owner's been working cooperatively with our code enforcement team to remedy that that violation. So it's going through the typical code enforcement channels. As long as the property owner is working cooperatively, we maintain that progression until it gets resolved.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's true. That he did not construct that. It was something that was already there.
Right, but
Yeah.
so you're working through the violation.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? All right, there's a motion on the floor. Let's have a roll call vote.
Mayor Mullen,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamont,
Yes.
Councilmember Peak,
Yes.
Councilmember Rosenthal,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wagner.
No.
Motion carries.
All right, this is item 7A. Thank you very much, everybody. Item 7A, which is Assembly Bill AB 3162, revising licensure and regulation of alcoholism and drug abuse recovery or treatment facilities.
3162.
What did I say? 81. Oh, man. Alzheimer's is kicking in already?
No, it's just
So bad. And the recommended action is to authorize the mayor to send a letter to the California State Assembly Committee on Health in support of AB 3162, legislation that would revise the health and safety code with regard to licensure and regulation of alcoholism or drug abuse recovery or treatment facilities. Lou, would you like to say anything about this?
Sure. As you know, this is a bill that we've been working on for a very long time. This particular bill, 3162, was actually written with a combination of the Department of Healthcare Services and Christie. And so it really is a Malibu-born bill. And it's being carried by Assemblymember Laura Friedman from Glendale. And the co-authors are Henry Stern and Ben Allen. And also Sharon Quirk-Silva from Fullerton. I have the League of California Cities supports this and put it on its hot bills list to support. Contract cities supported it unanimously also. As I tell you, we're halfway through the SCAG process, and so far it's been unanimous in support. I have letters of support from cities from Northern California through Orange County, and I think we should join it as well.
You even have letters of support from rehab centers, correct?
Actually, a couple of them, yes.
So do you want to make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we authorize the mayor to send this letter.
I'll second that.
Okay, wait, before we do a vote, I want to have a comment. This is a big deal, and I just wanted to say that I sincerely appreciate all the hard work that you've done. This is like, of all the things we have to face in the city, Conservancy included, this is like the gnarliest one. The FAA routes may be easier than this one. So I really appreciate all the incredible diligence that you've done through the years to begin to change the unchangeable. And I have undying gratitude for all the hard work that you've done. And I think Malibu owes you a huge debt of gratitude, no matter how this thing turns out. So
Thank you. That really means a lot to me. Thank you.
All right, so we have a roll call vote on that, please.
Councilmember Lamont,
Yes.
Councilmember Rosenthal,
Yes.
Councilmember Peak,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wagner,
Yes.
Mayor Mullen.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to, what? Did you want to say something? Well, I wanted to make a motion that we, do I have to make a motion to close the thing in memory of a guy? I withdraw my motion. I would like to adjourn this meeting in the memory of local resident and realtor Bill Chadwick, who passed away recently.
Thank you for doing that.
Do I have a second? Just kidding. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, Skylar.